Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been flying commercial routes out of Duluth for 16 years. Before that, I flew cargo routes in Alaska and then charter flights around the Upper Peninsula. My name is Graven Hurst, and until last November, I thought I'd seen everything the skies over the Great Lakes had to offer. The ice fog that turns your windshield white in seconds. The lightning that roams Lake Superior as if searching for something. The sudden temperature changes that make the islands appear to float. I was wrong about having seen everything. What happened on November 14th changed my flying style. It changed what I kept to myself and what I reported. It changed how I monitored radar screens and how I slept when sharp winds blew off the lake. I'm writing this because the official records are incomplete, and I believe this is intentional. Someone decided that a full explanation of what happened that night was unnecessary. I disagree. I was scheduled for a routine cargo run from Duluth International to Thunder Bay. The manifest was simple: medical supplies, automotive parts, and a pallet of winter gear for a mining camp north of the Canadian border. The aircraft was a Cessna 208 Caravan, single-engine turboprop, the kind of plane that does most of the real work in the North Country. Reliable, forgiving, and simple enough that you can fly it with your hands and your gut when the instruments go soft on you. Departure time was 9:45 p.m. The weather briefing showed clear skies, light winds out of the northwest, and visibility better than 10 miles. The moon was 3 days past full, bright enough to paint the lake silver. Perfect conditions for a night crossing. I filed my flight plan, did my walk-around, and pulled the chocks at 9:38. Tower cleared me for takeoff on runway 27, and I lifted off smooth into a cold, still night. The climb-out was clean. I leveled off at 8,500 feet and turned northeast, following the coastline until I'd cross open water near the Apostle Islands. From there, it's a straight shot across Superior to Thunder Bay. The distance is roughly 140 nautical miles. At my cruise speed, that's about an hour and 10 minutes gate to gate. I've flown that route hundreds of times. I know the shape of the shore by heart. I know where the lights cluster around Bayfield and Washburn. And I know the long stretch of black where the forest takes over and the towns fall away. I know the feel of the air when it's been sitting over cold water all day. That night, everything felt normal until I was 20 miles offshore. That's when Owen called. Owen Kessler works radar at Duluth Approach Control. We've known each other since I started flying commercial. He's steady, professional, and not prone to speculation. When he keys the mic, it's because there's something worth saying. His voice came through clear but with an edge I hadn't heard before. Caravan, November 437, Tango, Duluth Approach. You have traffic, bearing 045 at 30 miles, altitude unknown, stationary. I checked my heading. I was on a course of 055, almost directly toward whatever he was seeing. Stationary traffic over Superior is unusual. Ships don't show up on air traffic radar, and aircraft don't hover. Approach, November 7 Tango. Can you identify the traffic? Negative, no transponder, no flight plan, no radio contact. It appeared on scope 3 minutes ago and hasn't moved. Altitude readout is intermittent. When it shows, it's reading between 4,000 and 12,000 feet. That didn't make sense. Altitude doesn't fluctuate like that unless something is climbing or descending fast, and he said it was stationary. I scanned the horizon. The lake stretched out black and flat. The moon sat high and slightly behind me, throwing enough light to see the texture of scattered clouds far to the north. Dead ahead, nothing but empty sky. I'm not picking up anything visual yet, I said. Are you showing it in the same position? Affirmative. Same bearing, same range, no movement. It's been locked there for 4 minutes now. 4 minutes. In radar terms, that's an eternity for something that doesn't have a reason to be there. I tightened my grip on the yoke and kept my eyes forward. My airspeed indicator showed 155 knots. The engine gauges sat in the green. Everything on my end was normal. Then I saw it. At first, it looked like a star sitting too low on the horizon. But stars don't hold that steady when you're moving toward them at 180 miles per hour. This light didn't twinkle. It didn't shift color. It just sat there, cold and white, like someone had driven a nail through the sky and hung a lamp on it. Approach, November 7 Tango. I have a visual on the traffic. A single white light, stationary, appears to be over the water. Copy that, November 7 Tango. Do you want vectors around it? I thought about that. The light was on my course, maybe 15 degrees to the right of my nose. I could adjust my heading and give it a wide berth. That would be the safe choice, the one that keeps you out of incident reports. But something in me wanted to know what it was. I told myself it was probably a research buoy with a beacon, or maybe a helicopter from Coast Guard. Air Station Traverse City running a night exercise. Explanations that fit inside the normal world. Negative, approach. I'll maintain course and altitude. If it moves, let me know. Wilco. I kept my eyes on the light. As I closed the distance, I expected it to resolve into something I recognized. A rotor disc, a fuselage, navigation strobes. It didn't. The light stayed as it was, a single, unwavering point of cold white, brighter now, but still without detail. No red, no green, no flashing, just white. At 10 miles, I could see it clearly. It hung in the air maybe 2,000 feet below me and slightly to my right. The reflection off the lake gave me a reference point. The water underneath it glowed faintly, like someone had turned on a lamp beneath a black sheet. That reflection didn't spread or ripple. It sat directly under the light in a tight circle, as if the source was small and focused. My radio crackled. November 7 Tango, Duluth approach. Traffic is still stationary. You're at 8 miles and closing. Roger. I'm going to descend for a closer look. I didn't wait for approval. I pulled the power back and pushed the nose down gently, dropping through 8,000 feet, then 7,000. The light held its position. No drift, no climb, no reaction to my approach. I leveled off at 6,500 feet and adjusted my heading to pass directly over it. At 3 miles, I saw the second light. It came up from the water, or at least it appeared that way. One moment there was only the reflection on the surface. The next, a second point of light rose smoothly from the lake and stopped exactly level with the first. They sat side by side, maybe 500 feet apart, hovering with the same unnatural stillness. My mouth went dry. I keyed the mic. Approach, November 7 Tango. I now have 2 lights, same characteristics. One appears to have ascended from the surface. Are you picking up 2 targets? There was a pause, longer than it should have been. November 7. Tango. We're showing. Stand by. I didn't like that. Owen doesn't hesitate. I kept my course and my eyes on the lights. They were directly ahead now, maybe 2 miles. I could see the glow on the water beneath each of them, 2 pale circles side by side on the black surface. No boats, no whitecaps, no sign of anything physical breaking the plane of the lake. November 7 Tango, Duluth approach. We're showing intermittent returns in that area. Count is uncertain. The primary target remains stationary. Intermittent returns. That's radar talk for something that shouldn't be there, or something the system can't make sense of. I've heard it before when weather paints false targets, or when a flock of birds confuses the software. This wasn't weather. This wasn't birds. I closed to within a mile. The lights were brilliant now, bright enough that I had to squint. They didn't hurt to look at, but they dominated my vision. Everything else, the instrument panel, the lake, the stars, faded into background. The lights became the only thing that mattered. That's when the cockpit went cold. Not a gradual chill. A sudden drop, like someone opened a freezer door behind my seat. I could see my breath. The windscreen fogged at the edges. I glanced at the outside air temperature gauge, minus 12 degrees Celsius. It had been -8 when I took off. A 4-degree drop in seconds doesn't happen at cruise altitude over open water. I reached for the defroster control and stopped. My hand was shaking, not from cold, from something I couldn't name. It sat in my chest and pressed outward, a feeling like I was being watched by something I couldn't see. I felt it once before, years ago, when I stumbled onto a fresh bear kill in the Alaska bush. That sense that you're not alone, and that whatever is with you is deciding whether you're a threat. I flew over the first light at 6,500 feet and 140 knots. The cockpit filled with white glare. I couldn't see the instruments. I couldn't see the windscreen. For 2, maybe 3 seconds there was only light and cold and the hum of the engine. Then I was through it, and the world came back. I looked over my shoulder. The 2 lights still hung in the air behind me, side by side, as if I had never passed. The glow on the water beneath them remained. I turned my head forward and checked my gauges. Airspeed normal, altitude holding, engine temps in the green. I was fine. The plane was fine. Everything was fine except for the sick weight in my stomach. November the 7 Tango, Duluth approach. We lost you on scope for approximately 5 seconds. Do you copy? I copy, I said. My voice sounded thin. I just overflew the lights, no identification, returning to course. Roger. Advise if you see anything else. I turned back onto my original heading and climbed to 8,500 feet. I didn't look back again. I didn't want to. The lights didn't follow. When I finally worked up the nerve to check my 6 o'clock, they were gone. The lake behind me was black and empty. No glow, no reflection, nothing. The rest of the flight to Thunder Bay was uneventful. I landed, offloaded the cargo, filed my paperwork, and drank 2 cups of coffee in the pilot lounge while the ground crew refueled. I didn't mention the lights to anyone there. I told myself I'd write it up in the morning and let the FAA decide what to do with it. Owen called me on my personal cell at 1:30 a.m. while I was in the hotel. "You awake?" he asked. "Yeah." "We need to talk about tonight." "I know." "Not on the phone. When you get back. What happened to the radar file?" He was quiet for a moment. "It's not there." "What do you mean it's not there?" "I mean I pulled the recording an hour after you landed and the section from 10:05 to 10:30 is blank. No targets, no track data, no voice recordings, just empty scope." I sat up in bed. "That doesn't happen." "I know it doesn't, but it did. I checked twice. The file is intact before and after, but that 25-minute window is gone like it never existed." "Did you report it?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first." I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the flight in my head. The stationary target. The second light rising from the water. The cold in the cockpit. The 5 seconds when Duluth lost me on radar. The blank file. I flew back the next afternoon under clear skies and light chop. The crossing took an hour and 12 minutes. I didn't see anything unusual. I didn't report anything unusual. When I landed, Owen met me in the crew room. We sat at a corner table with the door closed. "I need you to tell me exactly what you saw," he said. I did. I walked him through the whole flight from the moment he called with the traffic alert to the moment I turned back on course. I didn't leave anything out. When I finished, he just nodded. "I saw 3 targets," he said. "Not 1, not 2, 3. They appeared simultaneously at 10:05 and held formation for 4 minutes. Then you started your descent, and the scope went haywire. I got intermittent returns all over that sector, altitudes jumping, speeds that don't make sense. When you passed over them, everything blanked. No you, no targets, no primary returns. Just static. Did anyone else see it? I was the only one on scope. Supervisor was in the break room. When the blanking happened, I called him over. By the time he got there, you were back, and the targets were gone. What did you tell him? Equipment malfunction. He logged it and moved on. We sat in silence for a minute. I could hear the muffled sound of engines spooling up outside. What do you think it was? I asked. Owen shook his head. I don't know, but I know what it wasn't. It wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't a plane, it wasn't a drone, and it sure as hell wasn't a weather balloon. Are you going to file a report? Are you? I thought about it. I thought about the blank radar file and the 5 seconds I disappeared from scope. I thought about the cold in the cockpit and the way the lights sat on the lake like they owned it. I thought about what happens to pilots who report things that can't be explained. The questions, the scrutiny, the quiet suggestions that maybe they need a break or a medical evaluation. No, I said. Not unless something else happens. Same, Owen said. We shook hands and left it there. I went home, poured a drink, and tried to convince myself I'd done the right thing. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The man on the other end identified himself as a representative from the FAA's Flight Standards District Office in Minneapolis. He said they'd received a report of unusual radar activity over Lake Superior on the night of November 14th and wanted to ask me a few questions. I told him I'd flown that route and hadn't seen anything unusual. He asked if I'd noticed any equipment malfunctions or anomalies during the flight. I said no. He thanked me for my time and hung up. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. Owen got the same call an hour later. They asked him about the blank radar file. He told them it was a software glitch and that he'd already filed a maintenance report. They thanked him and hung up. Neither of us heard from them again. I flew the Duluth-Thunder Bay route 6 more times in November. Every crossing, I watched the sky over the spot where I'd seen the lights. I never saw them again, but something changed in me. I started noticing things I'd dismissed before. Reports from other pilots about strange lights over the lakes. Stories from fishermen about objects rising out of the water on calm nights. Old Coast Guard logs that mentioned unidentified radar contacts near Isle Royale and the Keweenaw Peninsula. I wasn't looking for a pattern, I was just paying attention. And once I started paying attention, the pattern found me. On December 2nd, I was in the pilot lounge at Duluth International waiting for weather to clear when I met a guy named Marcus Duvall. He flew medical transports for a private outfit based in Marquette. We got to talking, the way pilots do when they're killing time, and he mentioned a strange flight he'd had over Lake Michigan in October. It was a routine run, he said. Iron Mountain to Milwaukee, middle of the night. I was at 9,000 feet, maybe 40 miles offshore, when my compass started spinning. Not drifting. Spinning, like I was sitting on top of a magnet. I set my coffee down. How long did it last? Maybe a minute. I switched to GPS navigation and kept going. When the compass settled, I was off course by about 15 degrees. No turbulence, no weather, nothing to explain it. Did you see anything? He looked at me for a long moment. You ask that like you already know the answer. I didn't say anything. Yeah, he said finally. I saw something, a light under the water, moving parallel to my course. Bright green, like a floodlight on the bottom of the lake. It kept pace for maybe 2 minutes, then dropped straight down and disappeared. Did you report it? To who? The Coast Guard? The FAA? What am I supposed to say? I saw a green light underwater while I was flying 9,000 feet above it? He shook his head. I wrote it in my logbook and left it alone. Has it happened again? No, but I don't fly that route at night anymore if I can help it. I understood that. I'd started doing the same thing. I wasn't refusing night flights, but I wasn't volunteering for them either. I told myself it was about fatigue, about wanting to see my family more, about getting older and valuing sleep. All of that was true, but the deeper truth was that I didn't want to be over open water in the dark anymore. I didn't want to see something I couldn't explain and then have to decide whether to report it or bury it. The next incident came secondhand. I heard it from a cargo coordinator at Thunder Bay who'd heard it from a ship captain who'd heard it from one of his deckhands. The details were fuzzy, but the core of it stuck with me. A freighter had been anchored near Michipicoten Island on the northeast side of Superior in late November, waiting out a storm. Around 2 a.m., the crew saw lights in the water near the hull. Not reflections. Sources. Multiple points of blue-white light, evenly spaced, forming a circle around the ship. The lights held position for about 10 minutes, then descended slowly until they faded from view. The crew reported it to the captain, who told them to keep it to themselves and went back to his bunk. When I asked the coordinator if he knew the name of the ship, he said he didn't. When I pressed him on whether the captain had filed a report, he shrugged and said probably not. Captains don't file reports about lights in the water unless someone drowns, he said. It's bad luck. That phrase stuck with me. Bad luck. As if seeing something unexplained wasn't just a curiosity or a puzzle to solve, but a thing to be avoided. A line you don't cross because crossing it brings trouble. I thought about calling Owen and asking if he'd heard anything from other controllers, but I didn't. We'd made an agreement to let it go, and I intended to keep it. But letting it go and forgetting it are two different things. Every time I flew over Superior, I felt a low hum of tension in my chest. Not fear, exactly. More like the feeling you get when you're walking through the woods and you hear a branch snap behind you. You don't see anything. You don't know if it's a deer or a person or nothing at all. But your body knows something is off, and it won't let you relax until you're back on the trail. On December 18th, I had a night crossing to Thunder Bay. The weather was cold and clear, winds light, visibility unlimited. Perfect conditions, the kind that make you love flying. I filed my flight plan, completed my pre-flight, and lifted off just after 10 p.m. The climb was smooth. I leveled at 8,500 feet and turned northeast, following the familiar route. The moon was just past new, so the night was darker than usual. The stars were dense overhead, layered and bright. I could see the Milky Way cutting across the sky like a brushstroke. I was 30 miles offshore when I noticed the oil pressure gauge fluctuating. Not wildly, just a slight wobble between normal and slightly low. I tapped the glass. The needle steadied. I made a note in my log and kept my eyes on it. A minute later, it wobbled again. I keyed the mic. Duluth approach, November 7 Tango. I'm showing intermittent oil pressure fluctuation. Everything else normal. Continuing to Thunder Bay, but I wanted you aware. Roger. November 7 Tango. Keep us advised. I wasn't worried. The engine sounded smooth. Oil temperature was normal. Sometimes gauges lie, especially in cold weather. But I tightened my grip on the yoke and started running through my emergency checklist in my head. Nearest airports, best glide speed, how much altitude I'd need to make the Canadian shore if the engine quit. That's when I saw the glow. It wasn't in the sky this time. It was on the water, off my left side, maybe 5 miles distant. A pale green luminescence spreading across the surface in a perfect circle, maybe a 1/4 mile in diameter. It didn't flicker, it didn't move. It just sat there, glowing like someone had poured phosphorescent paint on the lake. I stared at it. My brain tried to make sense of it. Bioluminescent algae, a chemical spill, a reflection from shore lights even though there were no shore lights anywhere near. None of the explanations fit. The glow was too uniform, too bright, too isolated. The oil pressure gauge dropped to the red. The engine sputtered once, caught, sputtered again. My stomach clenched. I scanned the panel, oil temperature rising. Cylinder head temps climbing. I had maybe 2 minutes before the engine seized. I keyed the mic, keeping my voice level. Duluth approach. November 7 Tango declaring an emergency. I'm losing oil pressure and experiencing engine roughness. I'm going to try to make the Canadian shore. November 7 Tango. Roger, your emergency. Nearest airport is Thunder Bay. Bearing 040 60 miles. Squawk 7700. I twisted the transponder to 7700, the emergency code, and pushed the nose down to build speed. The engine coughed and ran rough, like it was trying to shake itself apart. I trimmed for best glide and started calculating. I was at 8,500 feet. My glide ratio was about 9-to-1. That gave me maybe 13 miles before I hit the water, if the engine quit completely. The Canadian shore was 25 miles away. I wasn't going to make it. Then the glow on the water moved. It slid across the surface toward me, fast, impossibly fast. In the span of maybe 10 seconds, it closed the distance from 5 miles to directly beneath me. The cockpit filled with green light. The instrument panel glowed. My hands on the yoke looked skeletal, lit from below like a Halloween mask. The engine smoothed out. The roughness stopped. The oil pressure gauge climbed back into the green. The temperature dropped. Within seconds, everything was normal again. The gauges sat steady. The engine purred. I pulled back to level flight and stared at the panel. Nothing made sense. Engines don't heal themselves. Oil pressure doesn't recover once it's lost. I glanced down at the water. The green glow was still there directly below me, keeping pace. Then, slowly, it began to fade. In less than a minute, it was gone, and the lake was black again. November 7 Tango, Duluth approach. What's your status? I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I tried again. Approach, November 7 Tango. Engine has recovered. All indications normal, canceling emergency. There was a pause. November 7 Tango, say again. Engine is running normally. Oil pressure in the green. Temperatures normal. Request clearance to continue to Thunder Bay. Another pause, longer this time. Roger, November 7 Tango. Continue as filed. Contact Thunder Bay Tower on 118.7. Squawk normal. I changed the transponder back, switched frequencies, and flew the rest of the way in silence. My hands didn't stop shaking until I was on the ground. I taxied to the ramp, shut down, and sat in the cockpit for 5 minutes before I could bring myself to move. When I climbed out and did my post-flight inspection, I found the oil cap loose. Not missing, not stripped, just loose, like someone had turned it a quarter rotation counterclockwise. I tightened it by hand. The oil level was normal. There were no leaks, no signs of mechanical failure, Nothing to explain what had happened. I filed my post-flight report and listed the incident as intermittent oil pressure indication due to loose filler cap. That was true, as far as it went. I didn't mention the glow on the water or the way the engine had healed itself. I didn't mention that I'd been ready to ditch in Superior and that something had stopped me from having to. I called Owen from the hotel. It was past midnight, but he answered. "It happened again," I said. "Where?" I told him. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You need to stop flying that route," he said. "I can't. It's my job." "Then stop flying it at night." "I'll try." "Don't try. Do it. Something out there knows you're watching, and it's starting to watch back." I hung up and lay on the bed with my eyes open. I didn't sleep. I kept seeing the green glow moving across the water toward me, faster than anything on the surface had a right to move. I kept feeling the moment when the engine smoothed out and the gauges climbed back to normal, as if something had reached into the machinery and fixed it. The next morning, I drove to a marine supply store in Thunder Bay and bought a handheld VHF radio. I programmed it to the Coast Guard emergency frequency and the common ship-to-ship channels. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I wanted a way to hear what was happening on the water when I was in the air above it. I flew back to Duluth that afternoon. The crossing was uneventful. No lights, no glows, no engine trouble. When I landed, I went straight to the maintenance hangar and asked the mechanic to go over the Caravan from nose to tail. He spent 3 hours on it and found nothing wrong. The engine was clean. The oil system was tight. Everything checked out. "Did you hit a bird or something?" he asked. "No, I just want to be sure." He looked at me like I was being paranoid, but he didn't argue. When he was done, he handed me the logbook and said the plane was airworthy. I signed off on it and went home. I didn't fly for 4 days after that. I told dispatch I needed personal time. They didn't ask questions. When I finally went back on the schedule, I requested daytime routes only. Duluth to Minneapolis, Minneapolis to Fargo, Fargo to Bismarck. Anything that kept me away from Superior at night. I kept the VHF radio in my flight bag. On December 30th, I was sitting in the crew room between flights when I turned it on and scanned through the channels. Most of it was routine ship traffic. Position reports, weather updates, chatter between captains and dock workers. Then, on Channel 16, I heard something that made me stop. "Coast Guard, Coast Guard, Coast Guard, this is motor vessel Northern Grace. We have a situation." The voice was tense but controlled. I turned up the volume. "Motor vessel Northern Grace, this is Coast Guard Station Duluth. Go ahead with your situation. We're anchored approximately 12 miles northeast of Silver Bay. We've got lights in the water around our hull, and they're moving. Over." "Northern Grace? Say again. You have lights in the water?" "Affirmative. 6, maybe 8 points of light, white in color, circling the ship at about 100 feet distance. They've been there for 5 minutes. No sound, no surface disturbance. Over." There was a pause. I could hear the uncertainty in the coastie's voice when he responded. "Northern Grace. Are you in distress? Do you require assistance?" "Negative on distress. We don't know what we're looking at. The crew is getting nervous." "Stand by, Northern Grace." I sat forward in my chair. Other pilots in the room were talking, pouring coffee, checking their phones. None of them were listening. I pulled out my own phone and opened a map. Silver Bay is on the north shore of Superior, about 50 miles northeast of Duluth. If I drew a line from there to the spot where I'd seen the green glow, they'd intersect. The radio crackled. "Northern Grace, Coast Guard Station Duluth. We're showing your position. Can you provide a description of the lights, size, color, depth?" They're about, I'd say 6 feet in diameter, bright white, just below the surface. Depth, maybe 10 to 15 feet. They're not stationary. They're orbiting the ship in a clockwise direction. Very slow, very precise. Over. Roger, are you experiencing any mechanical or electrical issues? Negative. All systems normal. Understood. Continue to monitor. We're dispatching a small boat from 2 harbors. ETA approximately 1 hour. Copy that. Northern Grace standing by. I waited. The channel went quiet. I checked the time. 2:47 p.m. An hour passed. I kept the radio on and listened to the normal back and forth of ship traffic. At 3:52, the Northern Grace came back on. Coast Guard Station Duluth, Northern Grace. The lights are gone. They descended slowly about 10 minutes ago and disappeared. No trace. Over. Roger, Northern Grace. Are you requesting the small boat continue to your position? Negative, we're fine. Everything's back to normal. We'll continue to monitor. Northern Grace out. That was it. No follow-up, no explanation. Just gone. I turned off the radio and sat there staring at the wall. Around me, pilots were getting called for flights, checking manifests, heading out to the ramp. Normal operations. Normal day. I wanted to tell someone what I'd just heard, but I knew how it would sound. Crazy. Paranoid. A guy who spends too much time alone in a cockpit making up stories to keep himself awake. But it wasn't a story. It was the third event in less than 2 months, and all of them followed the same pattern. Lights in or near the water. Mechanical anomalies. No physical evidence. No official follow-up. And a quiet, unspoken agreement among everyone involved not to push it any further than necessary. I made a decision that day. I was going to find out what was happening on Superior, even if I had to do it on my own time with my own money. I wasn't going to file reports or call the FAA or try to convince anyone. I was just going to watch and listen and collect what I could. It took me 2 weeks to find the right person. His name was Thomas Braden, and he'd been working commercial fishing boats out of Grand Marais for 30 years. I found him through a friend of a friend, the way you find people who know things they're not supposed to talk about. We met at a bar on the harbor in early January. It was cold enough that the lake was starting to freeze near shore, and the wind came off the ice like a knife. Thomas was in his early 60s, broad-shouldered, with hands that looked like they'd been carved from driftwood. He didn't waste time with small talk. "You're the pilot," he said. "I am." "You saw lights over the lake." "I did." He nodded and took a drink from his beer. "Everyone sees them eventually. The ones who work the water, I mean. Fishermen, tugboat crews, ore haulers. We all see them. We just don't talk about it because talking about it makes people think you're crazy or drunk or both." "When did you first see them?" 1997. I was running nets near Isle Royale, about 3 miles offshore. Middle of the night, dead calm, clear sky. I saw 3 lights come up from the water in a straight line, hover for maybe 30 seconds, then shoot straight up and disappear. No sound, no splash, just gone. "Did you report it?" He laughed, short and bitter. "To who? The Coast Guard? They'd have told me I was seeing flares or a boat with spotlights." I kept my mouth shut and kept working. But after that, I started paying attention. And once you start paying attention, you see them all the time. All the time? Not every night, but often enough. Especially in the fall and winter, when the water's cold and the traffic's light. I've seen lights under the ice. I've seen them pacing our boat for miles. I've seen them rise and fall like they're checking something on the bottom. And I've talked to other guys who've seen the same things. Have any of you figured out what they are? He shook his head. "We don't try. The ones who do, the ones who get curious and start taking pictures or bringing out gear to measure things, they don't last long. What does that mean? It means bad luck, equipment failures, boats that sink for no reason, guys who go out and don't come back. You start poking at something that doesn't want to be poked, and eventually it pokes back. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. You think the lights are, what, intelligent? I think they're deliberate. I think they operate on a schedule or a purpose we don't understand. And I think they don't like being watched too closely. He leaned forward. You want my advice? Stop flying that route at night. If you have to fly it, stay high and keep moving. Don't try to get a better look. Don't chase them. And whatever you do, don't tell anyone official. Because the moment you do, you become a problem. And problems get solved. Solved how? You ever hear of the Carl D. Bradley? I had. The Bradley was a freighter that sank in Lake Michigan in 1958 during a storm. It broke in half and went down fast. 33 men died. Only 2 survived. The Bradley went down in a storm, Thomas said. But there were other ships that went down in calm water. The Edmund Fitzgerald, the Daniel J. Morrell, the Henry Steinbrenner. Big ships, experienced crews, no weather to explain it. The official reports always find a reason. Structural failure, rogue waves, human error. But the guys who work these lakes know better. We know there are things down there that don't show up on sonar and don't leave wreckage you can explain. You're saying the lights are connected to shipwrecks? I'm saying the lights are part of something bigger, and we're not supposed to understand it. The lake has its own rules, and if you break them, it reminds you who's in charge. We talked for another hour. He told me about other incidents. Nets that came up empty in places that had been full of fish the day before. Compasses that spun in circles near certain underwater formations. Radio equipment that failed when boats passed over deep trenches. Stories passed down from old captains who'd seen things they couldn't name and learned to avoid the places where those things happened. When we were done, Thomas handed me a folded map of Lake Superior. It was old, printed on thick paper, with depth contours marked in blue. He'd drawn red circles in several locations. These are the hot spots, he said. Places where the sightings cluster. If you're flying at night, stay away from them. I looked at the map. One of the circles was near the Apostle Islands. Another was northeast of Silver Bay. A third was directly over the spot where I'd seen the stationary lights in November. How many people know about this? I asked. More than you'd think. But we keep it quiet. It's an unwritten rule. You see something, you note it, and you move on. You don't make a big deal out of it. You don't bring in outsiders. And you sure as hell don't put it in writing. Why not? He looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. Because the minute you do, someone shows up to make sure you shut up. I've seen it happen. Guys who talk too much getting visits from men in suits. Guys who took pictures having their film confiscated. Guys who filed reports getting their licenses pulled for safety violations that didn't exist. You think the government doesn't know about the lights? They know. They've always known. They just don't want the rest of us talking about it. I left the bar with the map in my jacket and a weight in my chest that hadn't been there before. I'd gone looking for answers, and I'd found a bigger question. If the lights were real, and if people in positions of authority knew about them, why was the official response always silence? I flew 3 more times in January, all daytime routes. I didn't see any lights. I didn't hear any strange radio traffic. Everything was normal, and that normalcy felt like a lie. On February 8th, I got a call from dispatch. They needed someone to fly a medical supply run to Thunder Bay that night. The regular pilot had called in sick. It was short notice, but the cargo was time-sensitive. Insulin and blood products for a clinic in a remote area north of the Canadian border. I almost said no. I had Thomas's map in my flight bag, and I could see the red circles in my mind. But the dispatcher sounded desperate, and I knew that people were depending on that cargo. I said yes. I filed my flight plan and took off just after 9 p.m. The weather was cold and clear. Winds were light out of the west. I climbed to 8,500 feet and turned northeast. I decided to fly a modified route, one that would take me north of the hot spots on Thomas's map. It added 15 minutes to the flight, but I didn't care. I wasn't taking chances. At 40 miles offshore, I turned on the VHF radio and scanned the marine channels. Everything was quiet. I checked my position on the GPS. I was north of the Apostle Islands, well clear of the area where I'd seen the lights in November. I relaxed a little. The cockpit was warm. The stars were bright. The lake below was a black mirror. I let my mind wander and thought about what I'd do when I landed. Check into the hotel, grab a late dinner, sleep until noon. Simple plans. Comfortable plans. Then I saw them, not below me, not on the water. In the sky, off my right side, maybe 2 miles distant and level with my altitude. 4 lights in a diamond formation, moving in perfect synchronization. They weren't aircraft. I know aircraft. These had no navigation strobes, no landing lights, no silhouette. Just 4 white points holding formation like they were welded together. I keyed the mic. Duluth approach, November 7 Tango. I have visual on 4 lights in formation, bearing 090, 2 miles, altitude approximately 8,500. Can you confirm traffic? There was no response. I tried again. Duluth approach, November 7 Tango. Do you copy? Static. I checked my radio. The power was on. The frequency was correct. But there was no carrier wave, no background noise, just silence. The lights began to move. They broke formation and spread out, each one taking a position around me. One ahead, one behind, one on each side. They held those positions for maybe 10 seconds, then closed in. I could see them through the side windows now, bright enough to cast shadows in the cockpit. My instruments started to flicker. The GPS lost signal, the compass spun. The artificial horizon tilted even though I was flying straight and level. I felt the same cold I'd felt in November, sudden and sharp, and the same pressure in my chest. I did the only thing I could think of. I dove. I pushed the yoke forward and dropped the nose, aiming for 4,000 feet. The lights followed. They stayed in formation around me, matching my descent, as if they were tied to my wingtips with invisible string. My airspeed climbed. The engine roared. The altimeter unwound fast. At 5,000 feet they broke off. All 4 at once, shooting straight up and out of sight in less than a second. My instruments steadied. The GPS reacquired signal. The radio came back with a burst of static, and then Owen's voice. November 7 Tango, Duluth approach, say your altitude. I checked the altimeter. I was at 4,200 feet and still descending. I pulled back on the yoke and leveled off. Approach, November 7 Tango, level at 4,000. I had an instrument malfunction and descended to troubleshoot. Roger, November 7 Tango. We lost your transponder for approximately 2 minutes. Are you declaring an emergency? Negative. Everything's back to normal. Request clearance to continue to Thunder Bay. Cleared as filed. Contact Thunder Bay Tower on 118.7. I switched frequencies and flew the rest of the way in silence. My hands didn't shake this time. I was too numb for that. When I landed and shut down the engine, I sat in the cockpit and stared at the instrument panel for a long time. I didn't file a report. I didn't call Owen. I didn't tell dispatch. I just went to the hotel, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling until morning. I quit flying the Superior route 3 days later. I told dispatch I wanted to focus on shorter regional flights, routes that kept me over land and close to airports. They didn't argue. There were other pilots who needed the hours. Owen called me a week after that. He'd heard I was off the lake runs. "Smart move," he said. "I saw them again." "I know. I saw what happened on scope. 4 targets in formation, closing on you, then gone. The file from that night is blank, too. How many files are blank now?" 7, all from November through February, all over Superior. I'm keeping a private log, but I don't know what to do with it. "Keep it private," I said. "Don't show anyone. Don't tell anyone. Just keep it for yourself." "Why?" "Because Thomas was right. If we push this, someone pushes back." I didn't explain who Thomas was. Owen didn't ask. I still fly. I still love it. But I don't go near Superior at night anymore, and I don't talk about what I saw. I've heard from other pilots since then, guys who've had similar experiences over Erie and Michigan. The pattern is the same. Lights, formation flight, instrument failures, missing radar data, and always the same response from official channels. "Nothing to see here. Move along." I keep Thomas's map in my flight bag. I don't need it anymore. I know where the hot spots are by heart, but I keep it as a reminder. The lake has its own rules, and I broke them. I got lucky. I got away with it. Not everyone does. If you're reading this because you're a pilot or a sailor or someone who works the Great Lakes, you already know what I'm talking about. You've seen the lights, or you know someone who has. You've felt the cold and the pressure and the sense that something is watching you from below or above or both. You've learned to keep your mouth shut because talking about it doesn't change anything except how people look at you. My advice is simple. If you see lights that don't make sense, don't investigate. If your instruments go haywire over open water, get to shore as fast as you can. If you feel like you're being watched, you probably are. And if someone official asks you what you saw, give them the smallest answer you can and walk away. The lake doesn't belong to us. It never did. We're just visitors, and visitors who forget that don't last long. I still fly over Superior sometimes during the day. The water looks clean and blue and harmless. I know better. I know what's down there, or above it, or moving through it in ways we don't understand. I know it watches, and I know it remembers. That's why I don't fly at night anymore. That's why I changed my routes. And that's why I'm writing this down, not to convince anyone or prove anything, but to put it somewhere outside my own head, because carrying it alone was getting too heavy. I'm done with the Superior. I'm done with the lights. I made my peace with not knowing, and I sleep better because of it. If you can't make that same peace, then you'd better be ready for what comes next. Because once you start looking, once you really start paying attention, the lake looks back. And when it does, everything changes. My name is Leah McConnell, and I've been a communications operator at Coast Guard Station Marblehead for 8 years. Station Marblehead sits on the northern tip of the Marblehead Peninsula in Ohio, right where Lake Erie opens up into a vast sheet of cold water that stretches north to the Canadian shore and east toward Buffalo. Our job is simple: monitor marine radio traffic, coordinate search and rescue operations, and maintain communication with vessels operating in our area of responsibility. The work is routine most of the time. Weather reports, position checks, the occasional distress call that turns out to be a broken fuel line or a fouled prop. You learn the voices of the commercial captains, the weekend sailors, the ferry operators. You learn the rhythm of the lake. What happened starting in October of last year broke that rhythm in ways I still can't fully reconcile with the training I received or the procedures I'm supposed to follow. I'm writing this because the official incident reports don't reflect what actually occurred, and I think someone needs to put the full sequence on record, even if that record never makes it past a desk drawer. It started on October 11th, a Tuesday, during the second watch. I came on duty at 1600 hours and relieved Martinez, who handed me a lukewarm cup of coffee and a status sheet showing normal traffic patterns. Winds were light out of the southwest, water temperature 58 degrees, visibility better than 5 miles. We had 12 vessels operating in our sector, all of them accounted for and running routine ops. The sun was still up, and through the operations room window I could see the lake spreading out flat and gray under a high, overcast sky. Commander Ray Holt was on duty that afternoon. He'd been stationed at Marblehead for 3 years and ran a tight shop. Former Navy, quiet, methodical, the kind of officer who reads every report and remembers every detail. He was in his office going over maintenance schedules when I settled into my chair and put on the headset. The radio setup at Marblehead is standard issue. We monitor VHF Channel 16, the International Distress and Hailing Frequency, along with several working channels used by commercial traffic. We also monitor 243.5 MHz, the military and civilian emergency frequency used by aircraft. It's rare to hear anything on 243.5 over the lake unless there's a search and rescue operation or a military exercise, but we keep it running in the background as part of our watch protocols. At 16:42 hours, I heard the first transmission. It came through on 243.5, faint and distorted, like someone speaking through a layer of static. The voice was male, steady, with no panic or urgency, just a flat statement of fact. Coordinates not holding. That was it. 4 words. Then silence. I waited for a follow-up. Standard procedure when you hear a transmission like that is to request identification and position. But before I could key the mic, the voice came through again, slightly clearer this time. Coordinates not holding. Repeat. Coordinates not holding. I leaned forward and adjusted the squelch control to clean up the signal. The static lessened, but the voice remained flat and distant. I keyed the mic. Station transmitting on 243.5. This is Coast Guard Marblehead. Identify your call sign and position. Over. No response. I counted to 10 and tried again. Station transmitting on 243.5. Coast Guard Marblehead. Please identify. Over. Static. I checked the frequency display to make sure I was transmitting on the right channel. I was. I glanced over at Commander Holt's office. The door was open, and I could see him at his desk, writing something in a logbook. I pulled off the headset and walked to his door. Commander, I've got an unidentified transmission on 243.5. Male voice, no call sign, reporting that coordinates are not holding. I've tried to raise him twice with no response. Holt set down his pen and looked up. Did he sound distressed? Negative. Very calm. Almost mechanical. He stood and followed me back to the comm station. I handed him a spare headset and we both sat and listened. The channel was silent for almost a minute. Then the voice came back. Coordinates not holding. System variance detected. Holt frowned. That sounds like a nav malfunction report. Could be an aircraft. Over the lake? I said. At this hour? Possible. What's the signal strength? I checked the meter. Weak, maybe 2 bars. Could be distant or low altitude. Holt keyed the mic. Unidentified station on 243.5. This is Coast Guard Station Marblehead. You are transmitting on an emergency frequency. Identify yourself and state your position. Over? We waited. Static crackled in our ears. Then, faint and distorted, the voice returned. This time it said something different. Position unstable. Reference markers shifting. Holt and I exchanged a look. Reference markers shifting. That's not standard terminology for any aircraft or vessel I know. It sounded like something you'd hear from a surveyor or a geodetic technician, not a pilot in distress. "He's not responding to hails," I said. "Do you want me to log it and move on?" "No. Keep monitoring. If he transmits again, I want a recording. Timestamp everything." I activated the digital recorder and noted the time in the watch log. 16:47 hours. Holt stayed at the station with me, and we both kept our headsets on, listening to the hiss of static and the occasional bleed-over from distant channels. At 16:51, the voice came back. This time, it was clearer, as if the speaker had moved closer to the microphone, or the signal had strengthened. Coordinates not holding. Magnetic variance exceeds threshold. Unable to establish fixed reference. Holt keyed the mic immediately. Station on 243.5, Coast Guard Marblehead. If you are experiencing a navigation emergency, switch to Channel 16 and identify yourself. We can provide assistance. Over. Nothing. Just the empty hiss of the frequency. "What do you make of that?" I asked. "I don't know," Holt said. "Magnetic variance. That could be a compass malfunction. But why is he transmitting on 243.5 instead of 16? And why isn't he responding?" "Maybe his receiver is out," I suggested. "He can transmit, but not receive." "Possible. But then why not squawk 7700 if he's in an aircraft? Why not activate an EPIRB if he's on a boat?" Those were good questions. I didn't have good answers. We sat there for another 5 minutes listening. The transmission stopped. At 1700 hours, Holt told me to make a detailed entry in the log and to flag it for review. He went back to his office and I continued my watch. The rest of the evening was quiet. I monitored the usual traffic. A tugboat checking in near Kelly's Island, a fishing charter returning to Sandusky, a freighter outbound from Cleveland. Normal operations. The sun set, the lake went dark, and the lights on the peninsula began to glow against the black water. At 2000 hours, I was relieved by Patterson, and I went home. I didn't think much about the transmission that night. Odd things happen on the radio all the time. Freak propagation can bounce signals hundreds of miles. Malfunctioning equipment can produce garbled messages. I assumed it would be logged, reviewed, and filed away as an unexplained anomaly. I was wrong. The next afternoon, October 12th, I came on watch at 1600 hours. Holt was already in the operations room, standing at the chart table with a printout in his hand. He looked up when I walked in. "McConnell, I need you to listen to something." He led me to the comms station and pulled up the audio file from the previous day. He played the transmissions in sequence, and I heard the same flat, distant voice repeating the same phrases. Coordinates not holding. Magnetic variance exceeds threshold. Unable to establish fixed reference. "I sent this to District 9 for analysis," Holt said. District 9 is the Coast Guard's 9th District headquarters in Cleveland, responsible for operations on the Great Lakes. They ran it through their comms techs this morning. Take a look at what they found. He handed me the printout. It was a technical analysis of the audio file, showing waveform patterns, frequency modulation, and background noise profiles. Most of it was over my head, but one section was highlighted in yellow. Background noise analysis. No marine engine noise detected. No aircraft engine noise detected. No environmental sounds consistent with waterborne or airborne transmission. Background contains low-frequency hum, consistent with electrical transformer or generator. Assessment: signal origin likely terrestrial, not marine or airborne. I read it twice. Terrestrial? You mean it was coming from land? That's what the analysis suggests, Holt said. But there's a problem. The signal strength and propagation pattern are consistent with the source over open water, not from shore. The text can't reconcile that. So what does that mean? It means someone was transmitting from a location that appears to be on the lake, but the audio characteristics indicate they were on land. Or, he paused, or they were on something that was sitting still on the water with no engine running. Like a drifting boat? Maybe. But if a boat is drifting and experiencing nav malfunctions, why wouldn't they call for help on 16? Why use 243.5? And why not respond to our hails? I didn't have an answer. Holt folded the printout and slipped it into a folder. Keep monitoring today. If we get another transmission, I want every detail logged. Signal strength, duration, exact wording, everything. Understood. I settled into my chair and began my watch. The afternoon was calm, the radio traffic light. At 17:10 hours, the voice came back. Coordinates not holding. My heart jumped. I grabbed the logbook and noted the time, then keyed the mic. Station on 2435, Coast Guard Marblehead. Identify yourself, over. No response. The voice continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Position reference unstable. Grid system unreliable. I activated the recorder and turned up the volume. The voice was clearer today, less distorted, but still flat and emotionless. It didn't sound panicked. It didn't sound human, in a way I can't fully describe. It sounded like someone reading from a checklist. Holt appeared at my shoulder. He must have been listening from his office. He leaned over and checked the signal strength meter. 3 bars, stronger than yesterday. He's closer, Holt murmured, or the signal's stronger for some other reason. The voice transmitted again. Magnetic deviation detected. True north variance exceeds acceptable limits. Holt keyed the mic. Station transmitting on 243.5. This is Coast Guard Marblehead. You are reporting a navigation malfunction. Do you require assistance? Over. Silence. Then, after a long pause, the voice responded with something that made my skin crawl. Assistance not required. System calibration in progress. Holt and I looked at each other. That was the first time the voice had acknowledged anything that resembled a response, but it didn't sound like a reply to our hail. It sounded like a status update, like the speaker was reporting to someone else, not to us. Station on 243.5. Who are you reporting to? Identify your call sign and your command. Over. Static. The voice didn't return. We waited for 10 minutes, then 20. Nothing. Holt told me to keep the recorder running and to note the time of the last transmission. 17:18 hours. Over the next 3 days, the pattern repeated. Every afternoon, between 16:40 and 17:20 hours, the voice would appear on 243.5 and transmit a series of short statements about coordinate failures, magnetic deviations, and system malfunctions. Each transmission was calm, precise, and unresponsive to our hails. And each day, the signal strength increased slightly, as if the source was moving closer to our station. On October 15th, Holt called a briefing with the watch team. He spread a chart of Lake Erie across the table and marked the approximate position where the signal seemed to be originating, based on triangulation data from other Coast Guard stations that had also picked up the transmissions. The mark sat in open water, about 18 miles north-northwest of Marblehead, in an area with no reported vessel traffic and no known structures. District has authorized us to send a patrol boat to investigate, Holt said. We'll go out tomorrow morning at first light. McConnell, I want you on comms during the patrol. If the voice transmits while we're out there, I want real-time coordination. Aye, Commander. The next morning, October 16th, Holt took a 25-foot response boat with a 3-person crew and headed north into the lake. I monitored their progress from the comms room, tracking their position on the chart as they radioed in regular updates. The weather was calm, the lake flat, visibility good. At 0947 hours, they reached the target area. Holt radioed in. Marblehead, RB 2505, we're on station. No visual contacts. Water depth here is 62 feet. We're going to run a search pattern. Copy, RB 2505, standing by. They searched for 2 hours, running a grid pattern and scanning with binoculars and radar. They found nothing. No boats, no debris, no anomalies. At 11:47, Holt called it off and headed back to station. That afternoon, I came on watch at 1600 hours as usual. At 16:49, the voice returned. Coordinates not holding. System recalibration incomplete. I keyed the mic and tried something different. Instead of asking for identification, I asked a direct question. Station on 243 F5. What system are you calibrating? Over. For the first time, the voice paused. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Then it responded. Geodetic reference system. Primary markers compromised. Geodetic reference system. That's the framework used for mapping and navigation. The invisible grid that defines latitude, longitude, and elevation. Why would someone be recalibrating that over Lake Erie? I glanced at Holt, who was standing behind me. His face was tight. He keyed the mic. Station on 243.5. Identify your agency and your mission. This is a restricted frequency. Over. Another long pause. Then the voice said something that changed everything. Survey complete. Variance documented. Returning to primary site. The transmission ended. We waited, but the voice didn't come back. I checked the time. 16:56 hours. That was earlier than usual, and the phrase, returning to primary site, suggested movement, a departure. Run a signal trace, Holt said. See if we can get a bearing on the source before it moves out of range. I activated the direction-finding equipment, a system that uses multiple antennas to triangulate the source of a radio signal. The equipment is old and finicky, but it works well enough for rough bearings. I watched the display as it processed the data. The bearing came back as 338 degrees true, distance estimated at 15 to 20 miles. I plotted it on the chart. The line ran north-northwest from Marblehead, passing through open water and ending near the cluster of islands around Kelly's Island and South Bass Island. He's moving toward the islands, I said. Or he was transmitting from near the islands and we're just now getting a clean bearing, Holt said. Either way, I want eyes on that area. I'm taking the boat out again. Now? It's almost 1700. You'll lose daylight in a few hours. I know. But if this guy is returning to a primary site, I want to know where that site is. Holt assembled a crew and launched within 30 minutes. I stayed on comms and tracked their progress. They headed north-northwest at full speed, following the bearing from the signal trace. The lake was calm, the air cold and still. At 1740, they reached the area near South Bass Island. Marblehead, RB 2505. We're in the target area. No contacts on radar. We're going to do a visual sweep near the south shore. Copy, RB 2505. I listened to the radio chatter as they motored along the shoreline, scanning the docks and the small marina. Nothing unusual. At 1802, Holt radioed again. Marblehead, we've got something. There's a small aluminum boat, maybe 16 feet, beached on the south side of the island. No markings, no registration visible. It's empty. We're going ashore to check it out. My pulse quickened. Copy, RB 2905, use caution. I waited, listening to the scratch of static in my headset. Minutes passed. Then Holt's voice came back, quieter than before. Marblehead, the boat is empty. No gear, no equipment, nothing inside except some mud and water. But there's something else. There are footprints in the sand leading away from the boat toward the tree line. They're recent, maybe an hour old. How many people? 1. Boot prints, size 10 or 11. They lead into the woods and we lose them in the brush. Do you want backup? There was a pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background. Holt conferring with his crew. Then he came back on. Negative, it's getting dark. We're going to mark the location and come back tomorrow with a full team. But McConnell, log this. The boat is sitting right at the water's edge, and there's no outboard motor. No oars, no paddles, nothing. I don't know how it got here. Understood, returning to station. Affirmative, ETA 1900. They made it back just as the last light faded from the sky. Holt came straight to the comms room, still in his float coat, and pulled up a chair next to me. I don't like this, he said. Someone is out there transmitting on an emergency frequency, reporting nav malfunctions, and then disappearing into the woods near South Bass. And they're doing it without a motor, without proper gear, and without responding to our hails. Could it be a prank? I asked. Someone messing with us? If it is, it's a hell of a prank. The analysis from District says the signal characteristics are consistent with professional-grade equipment, not some handheld radio from a marine store. And why go to all this trouble? What's the point? I didn't have an answer. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of the equipment and the faint murmur of distant radio traffic. Tomorrow we go back with a team, Holt said. We find that boat, we find the person who left it, and we get some answers. But answers were the one thing we weren't going to get. The next morning, October 17th, Holt assembled a 5-person team for the return to South Bass Island. I wasn't part of the boat crew. My job was to stay at the station and maintain comms, but I monitored every step of the operation from my chair in the operations room. The weather was cold and gray, with a stiff wind out of the west kicking up light chop on the lake. Holt's boat launched at 08:15 hours and made good time across the water. At 09:02, they reached the south shore of South Bass Island and found the aluminum boat right where they'd left it the night before. Holt radioed in a status update. Marblehead, RB 2005, we're on site. The boat is still here, still empty, no new tracks in the sand. We're going to secure the boat and follow the footprints inland. Copy, RB 2505, keep an open channel. I listened as the team moved into the tree line, their voices crackling over the radio as they pushed through brush and climbed over downed logs. South Bass Island is small, maybe 4 square miles, and most of it is either vineyards, tourist areas near Put-in Bay, or undeveloped woodland. The south shore where they'd found the boat is relatively isolated, away from the main village and the ferry docks. After about 15 minutes, one of the crew members called out. Commander, we've got something here. What is it? Holt's voice. Looks like a campsite, or maybe a work site. There's a tarp strung between 2 trees, and some equipment underneath. What kind of equipment? Radio gear, a portable generator, some kind of antenna setup, and, this is weird, there's a laptop computer still powered on. My pulse kicked up. I leaned forward in my chair and keyed the mic. RB 2005, Marblehead. Can you describe the radio equipment? There was a pause while someone examined the gear. Then Holt came back on. Marblehead. We've got a VHF transceiver, a handheld unit, and what looks like a direction-finding antenna. The laptop is open and running some kind of software. Looks like a mapping program. There are coordinates on the screen. What coordinates? Another pause. Stand by. I heard muffled voices, then Holt again. The coordinates are for a location on Lake Erie, about 18 miles north-northwest of Marblehead. That's the same area where we were searching yesterday. My skin went cold. Someone had set up a remote radio station on South Bass Island and was transmitting from there. But why? And where was the person now? RB-2505, is anyone at the site? Negative. The site is unattended, but the equipment is warm. The generator is still running. Whoever was here left recently. Search the area, I said. See if you can find them. Copy. The team spread out and searched the immediate area, calling out as they moved through the woods. After 10 minutes, they found nothing. No person, no vehicle, no indication of where the operator had gone. Holt made the decision to secure the equipment and bring it back to the station for analysis. Marblehead, RB-2505. We're packing up the gear and returning to base. I want this stuff examined by someone who knows what they're looking at. Understood, ETA? 10:30 hours. They loaded the equipment into the response boat and made the crossing back to Marblehead. I met them at the dock with a cart, and we hauled the gear up to the operations building. Holt spread everything out on a table in the briefing room. The transceiver, the laptop, the antenna, the handheld unit, and a portable GPS receiver I hadn't noticed before. The laptop was still running. Holt touched the trackpad, and the screen came to life. It showed a navigation program with a detailed map of Lake Erie. There were dozens of waypoints marked on the map, each one labeled with a set of coordinates and a timestamp. I leaned in and read some of the labels. The list went on. Each waypoint represented a location on the lake, and each one had a recorded variance measured in arc seconds. I didn't know what that meant, but Holt did. This is geodetic data, he said. Someone has been taking precise measurements of positions on the lake and comparing them to known reference points. The variances are tiny, less than 2 arc seconds, but they're real. That's about 60 meters of positional shift. Shift from what? I asked. From where the coordinates should be according to the geodetic reference system. GPS works by comparing signals from satellites to a network of fixed reference points on the ground. If those reference points aren't where the system thinks they are, you get errors. Small errors, but measurable. So, someone was checking to see if the GPS coordinates on Lake Erie were accurate? It looks that way, but why and who? I scrolled through the waypoints on the screen. There were 47 in total, spread across a wide area of the western basin of Lake Erie. The timestamps showed they'd been collected over the past 6 days, always in the late afternoon. The same time window when we'd been hearing the voice on 243.5. This is the person who's been transmitting, I said. They were out on the lake taking measurements and reporting the results. Reporting to who? Holt said. There's no indication of a recipient, no call sign, no agency identifier, nothing. He opened a folder on the desktop labeled Survey Logs. Inside were dozens of text files, each one containing a record of measurements, signal strengths, and variance calculations. I opened one at random and read the entries. I looked at Holt. Localized anomaly? Magnetic field inconsistent? What is this person looking for? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Holt pulled out his phone and called District 9. He spoke to someone in the operations center and requested a technical team to examine the equipment and the data. Within 2 hours, a pair of specialists arrived from Cleveland. A communications technician named Morris and a geospatial analyst named Parrish. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through the laptop, the radio gear, and the survey logs. At 1600 hours, just as I was starting my evening watch, Parrish came into the comms room with a printout in his hand. He looked troubled. "McConnell, I need to ask you something. When you were monitoring the transmissions on 243.5, did you notice anything unusual about the timing?" "You mean the fact that they always came in the late afternoon?" "Yes, but more specific than that. Did you notice the exact times?" I pulled out the watch log and flipped back through the entries. The first transmission on October 11th was at 1642, on the 12th 1710, on the 13th 1649, on the 15th 1656. They varied a little, but they were always between 1640 and 1720. Parrish nodded. "Right. Now look at this." He handed me the printout. It was a chart showing the sunset times for Marblehead over the past 2 weeks. The transmissions always occurred within 30 minutes of sunset, every single one, and the waypoints on the map show the same pattern. The measurements were always taken during the golden hour, that period just before sunset when the light is low and the angles are changing. So what does that mean? I don't know yet, but there's something else. Morris analyzed the audio files from the transmissions, and he found something odd. The voice you've been hearing isn't consistent. It's not the same voice every time. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean the pitch, the cadence, the prosody. They're all slightly different from one transmission to the next. It's subtle, but it's there. Either multiple people have been transmitting or..." He hesitated. "Or what?" "Or the voice is synthetic, generated by software." A chill ran through me. "You're saying it's not a real person?" "I'm saying it might not be. Morris is still analyzing the data, but he thinks the voice could be text-to-speech, a computer-generated voice reading from a script. If that's the case, then the person operating the radio was never speaking into the mic. They were typing messages and letting the software transmit them. Why would someone do that? To avoid identification. If we traced the voice and ran it through a database, we might be able to figure out who it is, but if it's synthetic, there's no voice print to match." Holt appeared in the doorway. "What have you got?" Parrish repeated his findings. Holt listened without interrupting, his face darkening. When Parrish finished, Holt said, "So, we've got someone conducting an unauthorized survey of Lake Erie, using professional equipment, transmitting on an emergency frequency with a synthetic voice, and collecting data on geodetic anomalies. Is that what you're telling me?" "That's what the evidence suggests, yes. And we have no idea who they are or what they're doing with the data." "Correct." Holt turned to me. "McConnell, I want you to monitor 243.5 continuously for the next 48 hours. If the voice comes back, I want to know immediately. Parrish, I want a full analysis of the survey data. I want to know what these anomalies are and whether they represent a legitimate concern. Morris, pull the transmission logs from every Coast Guard station on Erie. I want to know if anyone else has been hearing these broadcasts." "Understood," they both said. That night, I stayed on watch past my normal shift. I sat at the comms station with a thermos of coffee and my headset on, listening to the quiet hiss of 243.5. The frequency stayed silent. At 2100 hours, Patterson came in to relieve me, and I briefed him on the situation. I told him to call me immediately if anything happened. Then I went home and tried to sleep. I couldn't. I kept thinking about the synthetic voice, the survey logs, the waypoints on the map. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to collect very precise data about positions on Lake Erie, and they'd done it in a way that avoided identification and scrutiny. That suggested intent, purpose, and resources. But what was the goal? At 0300 hours, my phone rang. It was Patterson. "McConnell, you need to get back here. The voice is transmitting again." I was at the station in 15 minutes. Holt was already there, standing at the comms station with his arms crossed. Patterson had the transmission on speaker, and I could hear the flat, synthetic voice coming through clearly. "Grid reference failure detected. Primary datum compromised. Secondary markers offline." Holt keyed the mic. "Station on 243.5, this is Coast Guard Marblehead. Identify yourself immediately. You are transmitting on a restricted frequency. Over." The voice didn't acknowledge the hail. It continued as if we weren't there. "Geodetic framework unstable. Recommend immediate recalibration. Survey data suggests localized field distortion." I looked at Holt. "Field distortion? What does that mean?" "I don't know, but I'm getting tired of asking questions and not getting answers." He grabbed the phone and called Morris, who was staying at a hotel in Sandusky. "Morris, it's Holt. The voice is back. I need you here now." Morris arrived within the hour, bringing Parrish with him. They listened to the live transmission and pulled up the audio analysis software on the laptop. Morris ran the voice through a series of filters and nodded. "Definitely synthetic," he said. "It's a high-quality text-to-speech engine, probably commercial grade, the kind you'd use for accessibility software or automated announcements." "Can you trace it?" Holt asked. "We can try, but if they're using a portable setup like the one we found on South Bass, they could be anywhere. The signal strength suggests they're relatively close, maybe within 10 miles. But on a lake, that's a lot of area to cover." Parrish was staring at the laptop screen, scrolling through the survey logs. "Commander, I think I know what they're looking for." We all turned to look at him. He pointed at the map on the screen, where the waypoints were clustered in a rough arc across the western basin of Lake Erie. These positions correspond to an area known for magnetic anomalies. There's a geological formation under the lake here, a band of magnetite-rich rock that runs northeast to southwest. It causes compasses to behave strangely and can affect GPS accuracy in very small ways. Surveyors and geologists have known about it for decades. "So, this person is surveying the magnetic anomaly," I said. "It looks that way, but there's something else. Look at the variance measurements. They're increasing. On October 11th, the variance was less than 1 arc-second. By October 16th, it was up to 1.8 arc-seconds. That's a significant change over a short period of time." Holt frowned. "What could cause that?" "I don't know. Natural magnetic fields don't shift that quickly unless something major happens. An earthquake, a volcanic event, something that disturbs the underlying geology. But there's been no seismic activity on Erie, no eruptions, no fault movement, nothing that would explain this. So, what are you saying?" Parrish hesitated. "I'm saying that either the measurements are wrong, or something is happening under Lake Erie that we don't understand." The voice transmitted again, louder this time, as if the operator had increased the power. "Field distortion confirmed. Localized variance exceeds predictive models. Recommend evacuation of affected area." Holt's eyes widened. "Evacuation? Is that a threat?" "I don't think so," Morris said. "It sounds like a warning, like they're detecting something dangerous and recommending that people leave." "Dangerous how?" No one had an answer. The voice continued, now transmitting in rapid sequence, as if the operator was rushing to get the information out. "Magnetic field instability spreading. Predicted radius, 5 nautical miles. Duration, unknown. All vessels advised to avoid grid sector November Tango 4. I pulled up the chart and located sector November Tango 4. It was the same area where Holt's team had searched for the source of the signal, 18 miles north-northwest of Marblehead. That's open water, I said. There's nothing out there. Holt grabbed the radio mic. All stations, this is Coast Guard Marblehead. We are issuing a precautionary advisory for vessels operating in Grid Sector November Tango 4. Mariners are advised to avoid this area until further notice. Reason: possible magnetic anomaly affecting navigation equipment. Over. The channel went quiet for a moment, then responses started coming in from boats across the lake. Most of them acknowledged the advisory and reported no issues. But one voice stood out. Marblehead, this is commercial vessel Lakeshore Duchess. We're currently in Sector November Tango 4 and we're experiencing compass failure. Our GPS is showing erratic positions. We're unable to establish a reliable heading. Request assistance, over. My stomach dropped. Holt was on the mic immediately. Lakeshore Duchess, Coast Guard Marblehead. What is your current position and status? Marblehead, we're not sure. Our GPS is jumping all over the place. 1 second it shows us near Kelly's Island, the next it shows us near Cleveland. Our magnetic compass is spinning. We're holding a steady course by visual reference to the shoreline, but visibility is dropping and we're losing the lights. Lakeshore Duchess, how many persons on board? 4, all crew, no passengers. Stand by. We're dispatching a response boat to your location. Do you have radar? Affirmative, but it's showing intermittent contacts that don't match what we see visually. Holt turned to me. Get a boat crew together. I want them on scene in 30 minutes. Aye, Commander. I made the calls. Within 20 minutes, a response boat was launched with a full crew and instructions to locate the Lakeshore Duchess and escort them out of the affected area. I stayed on comms, coordinating the operation and tracking the response boat's progress on radar. At 0427 hours, the response boat reached the general vicinity of Sector November Tango 4. The crew reported clear skies, calm water, and normal conditions, but they couldn't find the Lakeshore Duchess. Marblehead, RB 2510. We're in the target area. No visual contact with the Duchess. We're scanning with radar and spotlight. Stand by. I keyed the mic for the Duchess. Lakeshore Duchess, Coast Guard response boat is in your area. Can you provide any visual reference? Do you see our searchlight? Static, then a weak, distorted voice. Marblehead, Duchess. We see nothing. No lights, no other vessels. We're alone out here. That didn't make sense. The response boat was less than a mile away, running a high-powered searchlight. There was no way the Duchess couldn't see it. Lakeshore Duchess, Coast Guard boat is within 1 mile of your last reported position. Activate your navigation lights and sound your horn. They will home in on your signal. More static. The voice came back, fainter now. Lights are on. Horn, not working. Electrical system, failing. We're losing power. Holt grabbed the mic from my hand. Duchess, this is the commander. Drop anchor immediately and activate your emergency beacon. Do not attempt to navigate. We will come to you. Acknowledge. The response was barely audible. Anchor down. Beacon. Activated. Then silence. The channel went dead. I tried to raise them again. Nothing. The response boat continued searching, running a tight search pattern, but they found no trace of the Duchess. No lights, no radar return, no EPIRB signal. It was as if the ship had vanished. The search for the Lakeshore Duchess continued through the night and into the next morning. Coast Guard assets from across the Great Lakes converged on Lake Erie. Response boats from multiple stations, a helicopter from Air Station Detroit, and a 110-foot patrol cutter from Buffalo. They combed Sector November Tango 4 and expanded the search area in concentric rings, scanning every square mile of water with radar, sonar, and thermal imaging. They found nothing. No debris, no oil slick, no emergency beacon, no life raft. The Duchess had simply disappeared. By 1200 hours on October 18th, the search was suspended pending further analysis. Holt sat in his office with the door closed, and I could see through the window that he was on the phone, his face tight with frustration. I stayed at the comms station, monitoring the channels and listening for any sign of the Duchess. At 1430 hours, the voice on 243.5 came back. Field distortion event concluded. Magnetic variance returning to baseline. Grid sector, November Tango 4, now stable. I grabbed the mic. Station on 243.5, this is Coast Guard Marblehead. A vessel has gone missing in the area you referenced. Do you have information about the Lakeshore Duchess? Over. For the first time since the transmissions began, the voice responded directly. Vessel displacement confirmed. 4 persons removed from affected field. Status, stable. Location, secondary reference point. My heart pounded. Station on 243.5. Identify the secondary reference point. Where is the vessel? Over. Coordinates. North, 41 degrees 32.7 minutes. West, 82 degrees 49.3 minutes. Vessel grounded on shoal. No injuries. Recommend immediate recovery. I plotted the coordinates on the chart. They placed the Duchess on a shallow reef near Rattlesnake Island, about 12 miles southwest of her last known position. That didn't make sense. For the Duchess to have traveled that distance, she would have had to motor at full speed for over an hour, but the crew had reported losing power. I radioed Holt. Commander, the voice on 243.5 just gave coordinates for the Duchess. They say she's grounded near Rattlesnake Island. Holt's voice came back immediately. Are you certain? Affirmative. Coordinates confirmed. Dispatch the nearest response boat. I want eyes on that location now. Within minutes, a boat was en route. I stayed on the radio, listening to their progress. At 1507 hours, they radioed in. Marblehead, RB 2512. We have visual contact with a vessel matching the description of the Lakeshore Duchess. She is hard aground on the north shoal of Rattlesnake Island. We see crew on deck. They appear unharmed, moving in to assist. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Holt's voice crackled over the command frequency. Get them off that boat and bring them here. I want statements from every crew member. The Duchess crew was brought to Station Marblehead by 1645 hours. They were cold, shaken, and confused, but physically unharmed. Holt and I sat with them in the briefing room while Morris and Parrish observed from the corner. The captain of the Duchess, a man named Gary Tillman, spoke first. I don't know what happened, he said. 1 minute we were on course, running steady at 8 knots, and the next minute everything went dark. Not like night dark, like we were inside something. The water disappeared, the sky disappeared. We couldn't see anything except the deck lights on the boat. How long did this last? Holt asked. I don't know. Maybe a minute, maybe 5. It's hard to say. Time felt wrong, like it was stretching out. Then the lights came back and we were somewhere else. We weren't moving, the engines were off, we were sitting on a reef, and the sun was in a different position. One of the other crew members, a young deckhand named Louis, spoke up. It felt like we'd been picked up and moved, like someone grabbed the boat and set it down somewhere else, but that's impossible, right? Holt didn't answer. He looked at Morris. Did your equipment pick up anything unusual during the time the Duchess was missing? Morris shook his head. Nothing on radar, nothing on the DF equipment. It's like the boat just blinked out of existence for a few minutes and then reappeared 12 miles away. Parrish leaned forward. Captain Tillman, did you notice anything unusual before the event occurred? Any strange readings on your instruments? Yeah, Tillman said. The compass started spinning about 5 minutes before everything went dark, and the GPS was showing us in 2 places at once. The primary display had us near Kelly's Island, but the backup unit said we were near Cleveland. I thought it was a malfunction, so I switched to Dead Reckoning. Then the darkness hit, and after that I don't remember much until we were on the reef. Did you see or hear anything during the event? Parrish asked. Lights, sounds, anything at all? Tillman shook his head. No lights, no sound, just nothing, like being in a void. Holt asked a few more questions, then dismissed the crew and told them to stay available for follow-up interviews. After they left, he turned to Morris and Parrish. Gentlemen, I need an explanation. What the hell just happened out there? Parrish looked uncomfortable. Commander, I can't give you a definitive answer, but based on the data we've collected, I can offer a theory. Go ahead. The survey data from the laptop shows a localized distortion in the geodetic reference frame. In simple terms, the coordinates in that area of the lake don't match the global positioning system. It's as if the physical space in that sector is shifted or offset from where the GPS satellites think it should be. Shifted how? I don't know, but the effect is measurable. If a vessel enters that area and relies on GPS for navigation, the system will place them in the wrong location. And if the magnetic field is also distorted, as the data suggests, then compasses will fail too. You lose both electronic and magnetic navigation and you're effectively blind. But that doesn't explain how the Duchess moved 12 miles in a matter of minutes, Holt said. No, it doesn't, unless... Parrish hesitated. Unless the space itself is warped. If the geodetic framework is distorted, then the distance between 2 points might not be what we think it is. You could enter the field at one location and exit at another without traveling the intervening distance. I stared at him. That sounds like science fiction. I know how it sounds, but the data supports it. The variances we're seeing aren't random. They're structured, as if something is bending the reference frame in a specific way. What could do that? I asked. I don't know. Intense magnetic fields can warp space-time on very small scales, but we're talking about effects that would require magnetic forces far beyond anything natural. Unless there's a geological formation under the lake that we don't know about, or... He trailed off. Or what? Holt said. Or someone is doing this deliberately. The room went silent. Holt's jaw tightened. You're saying someone has the capability to warp space and they're testing it on Lake Erie? I'm saying the data suggests intentionality. The survey logs we found on South Bass show a systematic approach. Whoever collected this data knew what they were looking for and knew how to measure it. And the transmissions on 243.5, they weren't random, they were status reports, updates on a project. What kind of project? I don't know, but I think we need to find the person who was transmitting, because they're the only one who can give us answers. Holt stood and paced the room. After a moment, he turned to me. McConnell, has the voice transmitted again since the Duchess was found? Negative. The last transmission was at 14:30 when they provided the coordinates. Keep monitoring. If they transmit again, I want to know immediately. He looked at Morris and Parrish. You two, keep analyzing the data. I want to know if there are other locations on Erie where this effect might occur. And I want to know if there's any way to predict when it will happen again. Over the next 3 days, we heard nothing on 243.5. The frequency stayed silent. The survey equipment we'd confiscated from South Bass yielded no useful leads. The laptop had been wiped remotely, and the serial numbers on the radio gear had been filed off. Whoever had set up the operation had covered their tracks well. On October 21st, Holt received a call from a senior official at Coast Guard headquarters in Washington. I wasn't in the room for the conversation, but I could see through the window that it wasn't going well. Holt's face was red, and he was gesturing sharply with his hands. When he hung up, he called me into his office and closed the door. "We've been told to drop the investigation," he said. "What? Why?" "Because the incident with the Duchess has been classified as a navigation error caused by equipment malfunction. The official report will state that the crew became disoriented, misread their instruments, and accidentally ran aground on the reef. End of story." "But that's not what happened," I said. "The crew said, I know what the crew said, but headquarters doesn't care. They've decided that the alternative explanations are too problematic. So we're shutting it down. The equipment we seized is being transferred to a research facility, and we're not to discuss the case with anyone outside the chain of command." "What about the voice on 243.5? "Officially, it was a hoax. Someone playing games on the radio. We're to log it and move on." I felt a surge of anger. "That's a cover-up." "That's an order," Holt said, "and we're going to follow it. Because if we don't, we'll both be reassigned to stations where we spend the rest of our careers pushing paper. Do you understand?" I understood. I didn't like it, but I understood. Holt dismissed me, and I went back to the comms station. That afternoon, I wrote up a final report summarizing the events of October 11th through 21st, carefully phrasing everything in neutral language and avoiding any speculation. I submitted it through the proper channels and tried to forget about it. But I couldn't forget. Every time I sat at the comms station and scanned through the frequencies, I listened for that flat, synthetic voice. I never heard it again. In November, Morris and Parrish returned to Cleveland, taking the survey equipment with them. I heard through unofficial channels that the data had been turned over to a Department of Defense research group and that the investigation was now classified. Holt never spoke about it again, and I learned not to ask. The Duchess crew returned to work after a week of medical leave. I ran into Captain Tillman at a marine supply store in Sandusky a few months later, and we talked briefly. He told me he'd sold the Duchess and bought a smaller boat that he only used for inland waters. He didn't want to go back out on Eerie. "Do you ever think about what happened that night?" I asked. He nodded. "Every day. I keep trying to make sense of it, but I can't. We were in one place and then we were in another, and I don't know how we got there. And the worst part is nobody believes us. They think we screwed up and won't admit it." "I believe you," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. "Thanks. But it doesn't change anything, does it?" No, it didn't. I still work at Station Marblehead. I still monitor the radios, and I still coordinate search and rescue operations. But something changed for me after October of last year. I used to think I understood the lake, that I knew its moods and its dangers. Now I know I don't. There's something out there, under the water, or above it, or woven into the fabric of space itself, that doesn't follow the rules I was taught. I keep a private log now, separate from the official records. I note every anomaly, every strange radio transmission, every report from mariners about compass malfunctions or GPS failures. Most of it is routine, equipment problems, user error, environmental interference. But once in a while I see a pattern that reminds me of October. Last month, I picked up a brief transmission on 243.5. It was faint, distorted, and lasted only a few seconds. The voice was different. Female this time, but the message was the same. Coordinates not holding. I noted it in my log and moved on. I didn't report it, I didn't investigate. Because I learned the hard way that some questions don't have answers, and some answers aren't meant to be found. The lake keeps its secrets. And the people who try to uncover those secrets either disappear, or they learn to keep quiet and look the other way. I've chosen to keep quiet. But I'm writing this down because I think someone should know what happened, even if that knowledge never leaves a desk drawer. If you work on Lake Erie, or any of the Great Lakes, and you hear a voice on 243.5 reporting navigation malfunctions or coordinate failures, don't try to help. Don't investigate. Just note it in your log and move on. Because whatever is out there, whatever is warping the reference frame and displacing vessels across impossible distances, it doesn't want to be understood, and it doesn't want to be found. I learned that lesson in October. I'm still here because I learned it quickly. Others weren't so lucky. The Lakeshore Duchess sits in a boatyard near Huron now, stripped and abandoned. The crew scattered, each of them carrying the memory of a night when the world stopped making sense. And somewhere out there, on a frequency I still monitor every day, a voice is transmitting, reporting variances, documenting anomalies, collecting data for a purpose I'll never understand. My name is Dana Bishop, and I'm a marine infrastructure engineer with Lakeshore Systems, a private contractor that installs and maintains underwater communication cables across the Great Lakes. I've been doing this work for 12 years, and in that time I've overseen hundreds of underwater operations, cable installations, repair dives, structural inspections. The work is technical, methodical, and predictable. We use remotely operated vehicles for initial surveys, deploy commercial divers for detailed work, and document everything with high-resolution cameras and sonar equipment. The lake bottom doesn't surprise me anymore. I know what buried cable looks like on sonar. I know what corrosion patterns form on steel casings. I know the difference between equipment malfunction and operator error. What happened during our inspection operation in September of last year falls outside that knowledge base. I'm writing this account because the official incident report, filed with both our company and the Coast Guard, contains only the facts that could be easily explained or dismissed. The parts that couldn't be explained were omitted, not because we wanted to hide them, but because we didn't know how to categorize them. This document contains the full sequence of events, including the details that didn't make it into the official record. The project was a routine inspection of the Mid-Lake Fiber Optic Cable System, a telecommunications line that runs 80 miles across Lake Michigan from Muskegon on the eastern shore to Milwaukee on the western shore. The cable was installed in 2018 and sits on the lake bottom at depths ranging from 200 to 580 feet. Our contract required annual inspections using ROV-mounted cameras to check for damage, corrosion, or displacement. The work typically takes 3 days, 1 day for equipment setup and transit to the inspection zone, 1 day for the ROV survey, and 1 day for any follow-up dives if problems are identified. We mobilized from Muskegon on September 18th, using a 65-foot survey vessel named the Northern Survey. The crew consisted of myself, our ROV operator, Jack Traynor, our dive supervisor, Marcus Voss, and 2 commercial divers, Maya Ellison and Sean Foster. Maya was our lead diver, a veteran with over 3,000 hours of deep water experience across the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. Sean was her tender and backup diver. We also had a 3-person boat crew handling navigation, deck operations, and safety protocols. The weather forecast was favorable. Light winds, calm seas, surface temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit, and good visibility down to about 30 feet. Below that depth, Lake Michigan is dark year-round, so visibility doesn't matter much. The ROV and the divers rely on artificial lighting for all deep work. We departed Muskegon at 0630 hours and reached the inspection zone by 0845. The target area was a 500-foot section of cable at a depth of 340 feet, located approximately 35 miles offshore. Jack launched the ROV from the stern deck, a blue robotics Odyssey with 4 HD cameras, side-scan sonar, and manipulator arms for light work. The ROV dove cleanly, and we watched the feed on the monitors in the control cabin as it descended through layers of green water, then gray, then black. At 340 feet, the ROV's forward lights illuminated the lake bottom. The terrain was typical for this part of Michigan. Flat, featureless silt, with occasional patches of glacial till and scattered rocks. The cable appeared on the sonar first, a straight line cutting across the seabed, then came into view visually as a thick black conduit partially buried in sediment. Jack piloted the ROV along the cable, scanning for breaks, kinks, or exposed sections. Everything looked normal. The cable was intact, the protective casing showed minimal wear, and there were no signs of anchor drag or trawl damage. Jack logged the findings in real time, and I made notes on the inspection checklist. By 10:30 hours, we'd surveyed about 200 feet of cable and were on schedule to finish the full section by early afternoon. That's when the first anomaly appeared. Jack was piloting the ROV forward along the cable when the sonar display flickered. A brief, sharp return appeared directly above the ROV, maybe 50 feet up in the water column, then vanished. Jack frowned and tapped the screen. "Did you see that?" he asked. "I saw it," I said. "What was it?" "I don't know. Could be a fish, could be a glitch. Big fish to show up that strong. Maybe a sturgeon. They get pretty big out here." We kept watching. The ROV continued forward, and the sonar stayed clean. After a few minutes, I dismissed it as an equipment hiccup. Sonar can throw false returns when temperature gradients shift, or when the transducer picks up noise from the ROV's own thrusters. It happens. At 10:47 hours, it happened again. This time, the return was larger and held on the screen for 3 full seconds before fading. It appeared as a solid mass, roughly 15 feet in diameter, positioned about 60 feet above the ROV. Jack stopped the vehicle and switched the camera angle to look upward. The water above was black and empty. "There's nothing there," he said. "But the sonar sees something," I said. "Yeah." Jack adjusted the sonar gain and ran a diagnostic check. The system came back clean. No errors, no interference. "It's gone now, whatever it was." Marcus, our dive supervisor, leaned over the monitor. "Could it be a thermocline? A cold layer sitting between us and the surface?" "Possible," I said. "But thermoclines don't usually present as discrete objects. They show up as gradual layers. Then what is it?" "I don't know. Keep an eye on it. If it shows up again, log the timestamp in the sonar image." Jack continued the inspection. For the next 20 minutes, the sonar stayed clear. The ROV moved steadily along the cable, cameras recording, everything routine. Then, at 11:12 hours, the top-mounted camera caught something that made all of us stop talking. A shadow passed across the field of view. It wasn't a flicker or a brief occlusion. It was a distinct, well-defined shadow moving slowly from left to right across the frame. The camera was pointed upward at about a 45-degree angle, capturing the water column above the ROV. The lights from the vehicle created a cone of visibility, and within that cone, we saw the shadow. It had shape and edges, like something solid passing between a light source and a surface, except there was no light source above us. The only lights were on the ROV, pointing down and forward. "What the hell?" Jack said. Marcus stepped closer to the screen. "Play that back." Jack rewound the feed and played it again. We watched in silence. The shadow entered the frame from the left, moved smoothly across the field of view, and exited on the right. It took approximately 4 seconds to cross. The shape was irregular, not round or symmetrical, but organic-looking, like the silhouette of something moving just beyond the reach of the light. "Is there something on the surface above us?" Marcus asked. I checked the boat's radar. Negative, no surface contacts within 2 miles. Then what cast that shadow? No one answered. We didn't have an answer. Shadows require a light source and an object to block that light. At 340 feet below the surface of Lake Michigan, there is no light except what we bring with us. The sunlight that penetrates the surface dissipates completely by 100 feet. Below that, it's absolute darkness. A shadow shouldn't exist. Could it be sediment? Jack suggested. Something stirred up from the bottom? Sediment doesn't move like that, I said. And it wouldn't create a shadow. It would cloud the water. Then I don't know what it is. Save the footage, I said. Mark it as an anomaly. We'll review it later. Jack saved the file and continued the inspection. The rest of the morning passed without incident. By 12:30 hours, we'd completed the survey of the 500-foot section. The cable was in good condition, no repairs needed. I signed off on the inspection report and told Jack to recover the ROV. The vehicle ascended smoothly, and Jack brought it alongside the northern survey at 12:45. The deck crew hoisted it aboard and secured it in its cradle. I went below to the galley for lunch, and the others followed. We ate in relative silence, each of us thinking about the shadow. After lunch, I pulled up the saved footage on my laptop and watched it again. This time, I slowed it down and examined each frame. The shadow was real. It wasn't an artifact of the camera or a trick of light. It was a distinct darkening of the water, moving with purpose and consistency. I tried to estimate the size of the object that could cast such a shadow. Based on the distance and the field of view, I calculated it would have to be at least 20 feet across, possibly larger. Marcus came up behind me and looked over my shoulder. "You figure it out?" "No, I said, but I know it's not equipment malfunction. This is real." "So what do we do?" "We report it, file it as an unidentified object in the water column, and move on." "You think the client will accept that?" "They'll accept the inspection results. The cable is fine, that's all they care about." Marcus nodded and left. I closed the laptop and sat there for a moment, staring at the bulkhead. Something about the shadow bothered me beyond the simple question of what it was. It was the way it moved, deliberate, smooth, like it was aware of the ROV and keeping pace with it. At 1400 hours, Jack reported that the ROV's top camera was showing a diagnostic error. He ran a full system check and found that the lens housing had a hairline crack. It hadn't been there during the pre-dive inspection, and the ROV hadn't impacted anything during the dive. The crack was clean and precise, as if the housing had been subjected to rapid thermal stress. "Could the lights have caused it?" Jack asked. "Maybe the housing got too hot?" "The lights run cool," I said. "And we've used this ROV in deeper, longer dives without any thermal issues. Then how did it crack?" I didn't have an answer. We logged the damage and made a note to replace the housing when we returned to port. The rest of the afternoon was spent securing equipment and preparing for the next day's operations. The plan was to move to a second inspection site 6 miles to the north and repeat the survey process. That evening, as the sun set and the lake went from gray to black, Maya came to find me on the deck. She was holding a printout of the sonar data from the morning dive. "I've been looking at this," she said. "The returns you got at 10:30 and 10:47, they're not random." "What do you mean?" "I mean, they're consistent with something moving at a fixed depth and a fixed speed. Look at the timestamps and the positions. Whatever caused those returns was pacing the ROV." I took the printout and studied it. She was right. The two returns were separated by 17 minutes and approximately 150 feet of linear distance. If you plotted them on a timeline and calculated the speed, you got a consistent rate of movement that matched the ROV's speed almost exactly. It was following us, Maya said. We don't know that. Then what's your explanation? I didn't have one. I folded the printout and handed it back to her. Keep this between us for now. I don't want to spook the crew. Too late. Jack already told everyone about the shadow. Of course he did. Dana, if there's something down there, I need to know before I dive. That's the rule. Full disclosure. There's nothing down there that's a threat to you. We've been working these lakes for decades. The worst thing you'll encounter is cold water and bad visibility. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded and walked away. I stayed on deck and watched the lights on the distant shore. I told myself Maya was reading too much into the data. Sonar returns can be deceptive. Objects in the water column, fish, debris, temperature layers, can create patterns that look intentional but aren't. The shadow was harder to dismiss, but I chalked it up to an optical phenomenon we didn't fully understand. Lake Michigan is deep and dark and full of things we don't see. That doesn't make them dangerous. I was wrong about that. The next morning, September 19th, we repositioned the Northern Survey to the second inspection site and prepared for another ROV dive. The weather had changed overnight. The wind had picked up out of the northwest, and the surface was choppy with 2-foot waves. Not dangerous, but enough to make the deck work less comfortable. The air temperature had dropped to 54 degrees, and the sky was a uniform gray. Jack launched the ROV at 08:15, and it descended into the murk. The water clarity was worse than the previous day, with visibility down to maybe 20 feet even at shallow depths. By 100 feet, it was black again. The ROV reached the lake bottom at 08:42 and located the cable without difficulty. Jack began the inspection, and I monitored the feed from the control cabin. At 09:10, the sonar picked up another return. This time, it was larger and closer, maybe 30 feet above the ROV. It appeared suddenly, held for 5 seconds, then vanished. I noted the time and the position in the log. Jack saw it too, but didn't say anything. He just kept piloting the ROV forward. At 09:23, the top camera caught another shadow. This one was bigger than the first, and it didn't just pass across the frame. It paused. For a moment, the shadow hung directly above the ROV, blocking out a significant portion of the camera's field of view. Then it moved off to the side and disappeared. Marcus was standing behind me, watching. That's not sediment. I know. So what is it? I don't know. We need to bring the ROV up and regroup. Not yet. We're halfway through the inspection. Let's finish the run, then we'll pull it and assess. Marcus didn't argue, but I could see he wasn't happy. Jack continued the survey, moving the ROV slowly along the cable. The sonar kept pinging, and every few minutes another return would appear in the water column above us. They were getting more frequent, more persistent. Whatever was up there, it was staying close. At 09:47, the ROV's lights flickered, just for a second, but it was enough to make everyone in the cabin tense up. Jack checked the power systems. Everything was nominal. The flicker happened again at 09:51, and this time the cameras went dark for a full 3 seconds before coming back online. That's not normal, Jack said. Agreed. Start bringing it up. We're done here. Jack began the ascent, piloting the ROV upward at a steady rate. As it climbed, the sonar display lit up with multiple returns. Not 1 or 2, but 5, 6, maybe more, scattered around the vehicle in a loose formation. They appeared, held for a few seconds, then faded as the ROV continued to rise. It's like they're escorting it, Marcus said. They're not escorting anything. It's sonar noise. That's not noise, Dana. I didn't respond. I kept my eyes on the monitor as the ROV climbed through 300 feet, 200 feet, 100 feet. At 80 feet, the water brightened slightly, and I could see particles drifting in the beam of the lights. At 50 feet, the surface was visible as a rippling silver membrane above. The sonar returns faded and disappeared. Whatever had been in the water with the ROV was gone. Jack brought the vehicle to the surface at 1005. The deck crew hooked it and lifted it aboard. I went out to inspect it and found the same hairline crack in the top camera housing that we'd seen the day before. Only this time, the crack was longer, running nearly halfway around the lens. The housing was cold to the touch, colder than it should have been after sitting in 62-degree water. "This doesn't make sense," Jack said. "The housing should be warming up now that it's out of the water, but it's still cold." I touched the housing myself. He was right. It felt like it had just come out of a freezer, not out of a lake. I pulled my hand away and looked at the rest of the ROV. Everything else seemed normal. No other damage, no corrosion, no anomalies. "Log it and prep for repairs," I said. "We're not diving this thing again until we replace that housing and run a full diagnostic." Jack nodded and got to work. I went back inside and called the project manager to report the issue. He wasn't happy about the delay, but he authorized the repairs and told me to proceed with a manned dive if necessary to complete the inspection. That meant putting Maya in the water. I didn't want to do that, not with the sonar returns and the shadows and the unexplained cold. But we were on a deadline, and the client was paying for results. So I called a meeting with the dive team and laid out the situation. "We've had some equipment issues with the ROV," I said. "Camera damage, power fluctuations, nothing catastrophic. But to stay on schedule, I need to send a diver down to visually confirm the cable condition in the second survey zone. It's a straightforward inspection dive. Depth is 340 feet, bottom time is 30 minutes, standard decompression. Maya, your lead. Sean, your backup. Any questions?" Maya raised her hand. "What about the sonar returns?" "What about them?" "You think they're connected to the equipment issues?" "I think they're unrelated. Sonar picks up a lot of things. Fish, debris, thermal layers. None of that is a safety concern for a diver." "What about the shadows?" "Optical phenomena, possibly caused by the ROV's lights interacting with particles in the water. Again, not a safety concern." Maya looked at Sean, then back at me. "Okay, but if I see anything unusual down there, I'm aborting the dive." No arguments. Agreed. We geared up for the dive. Maya, suited up in a commercial dry suit with heated undergarments, a full-face dive mask with integrated comms, and a twin-tank bailout rig for redundancy. She carried 2 lights, a GoPro camera mounted on her helmet, and a slate for notes. Sean helped her check the equipment and ran through the pre-dive checklist. Everything was perfect. At 12:15 hours, Maya entered the water and began her descent. I monitored Maya's dive from the control cabin, listening to her breathing over the comms and watching her helmet camera feed on the monitor. The water was murky near the surface, a gray-green soup of suspended algae and sediment stirred up by the wind. As she descended, the color shifted from green to gray to black. By 100 feet, the only thing visible on the camera was the narrow cone of light from her helmet lamp cutting through absolute darkness. Maya's breathing was steady and controlled. She reported her depth every 50 feet, passing 100, passing 150, passing 200. Her voice was calm, professional. This was routine for her. She'd done hundreds of dives like this. Sean was at the dive station on deck, monitoring Maya's umbilical and managing her gas supply. He called out depth readings to Marcus, who logged them in the dive book. The northern survey held position using dynamic positioning, the engines making small adjustments to counter the wind and current. Everything was running smoothly, textbook standard. I had the dive profile open on my laptop, tracking Maya's descent rate and calculating her bottom time and decompression obligations. At 340 feet, she'd have approximately 25 minutes of working time before her gas mix required her to begin ascending. It wasn't much, but it was enough to complete the visual inspection of the cable section we needed to document. Jack was in the cabin with me, reviewing the morning's ROV footage on a second monitor. He'd been quiet since the incident with the shadow, and I could tell it was weighing on him. Every few minutes he'd glance at Maya's camera feed, then back to his own screen, comparing what we were seeing now to what we'd recorded earlier. "You think she'll see it?" he asked quietly. "See what?" "Whatever was following the ROV." "I don't know. I hope not." "What if she does?" "Then we bring her up immediately. No arguments, no debates. Safety first." Jack nodded, but didn't look convinced. He pulled up one of the enhanced images showing the bioluminescent spots on the shadow's surface. "I've been looking at these. The pattern. It's not random. See how they're arranged in clusters? It reminds me of chromatophores." "What are those?" "Color-changing cells in cephalopods. Squid and octopus use them for camouflage and communication. They can activate them in patterns to send signals." "You think this thing is a giant squid?" "No. Giant squid are deep ocean creatures. They don't live in fresh water, and they definitely don't get big enough to match what we saw. But maybe it's something similar, something that evolved in the lakes." I considered that. The Great Lakes are ancient, carved by glaciers over 10,000 years ago. They're deep. Superior reaches over 100 to 300 feet, and largely unexplored below recreational diving depths. Could something have evolved in isolation down there? Something large and bioluminescent that we'd never documented? "If it's biological, someone would have seen it before," I said. "Fishermen, research vessels, other dive teams. Maybe they have. Maybe they just didn't report it, or maybe it's good at hiding." At 250 feet, I saw the first flicker on the helmet camera. Just a brief dimming of the light, like a shadow passing across the lens. Maya didn't mention it, so I assumed she hadn't noticed. The camera stabilized, and the descent continued. But something made me lean closer to the monitor. The flicker had been too quick, too subtle. I rewound the feed by 10 seconds and played it again in slow motion. There it was, a momentary darkening at the top edge of the frame, lasting maybe half a second. It could have been a particle of sediment drifting across the lens. Or it could have been something else. "Did you see that?" I asked Jack. He looked up from his screen. "See what?" "A flicker on Maya's camera, top of the frame. Could have been nothing. Or it could have been something." He came over and watched the replay. "Yeah, I see it. Want me to call it out?" "Not yet. Let's see if it happens again. I don't want to spook her unless we have to." Maya's voice came through the comms. "Passing 270. Water temp is holding at 58. Visibility near zero beyond my lights." "Copy," I said. "You're doing great. Another 70 feet to the bottom." "Roger. Hey, Dana." "Yeah?" "My suit heater just kicked on. Did the water temp drop?" I checked her telemetry. The external temperature sensor was reading 57 degrees, a 1-degree drop from a minute ago. "Looks like you're passing through a thermocline. Temp dropped 1 degree. Nothing to worry about." "Copy. Just feels colder than usual." That was odd. A 1-degree change shouldn't be perceptible through a heated dry suit. But I didn't want to alarm her, so I kept my voice neutral. "Keep me posted if it drops more." "Will do." On deck, Marcus called down to me through the intercom. "Dana, Sean's showing increased gas consumption. Maya's breathing rate is up." I checked the numbers. He was right. Maya's respiratory rate had climbed from 12 breaths per minute to 16. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Maya, you doing okay down there? Your breathing rate is elevated. Yeah, I'm fine. Just feeling a little, I don't know, uneasy. Can't explain it. Uneasy how? Like I'm not alone. Like something's watching me. Jack and I exchanged a glance. That was exactly what we didn't want to hear. I keyed the mic carefully. Maya, that's a normal response to solo diving in dark water. It's sensory deprivation. Your brain fills in gaps with phantom sensations. Just focus on your breathing and your depth. I know what sensory deprivation feels like. This is different. I checked the fish finder on the boat's nav system. There was a faint return showing up around 280 feet, roughly 60 feet above Maya's position. It was weak, barely registering, but it was there, and it hadn't been there a minute ago. Marcus, I said over the intercom, you seeing this on the fish finder? Yeah, just appeared. Could be a fish. Monitor it, let me know if it moves. Maya reached 300 feet. Her breathing had settled back to normal, and she didn't mention the uneasy feeling again. I allowed myself to relax slightly. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe the incident with the ROV had put everyone on edge, and we were seeing threats where none existed. But then the temperature sensor on Maya's suit dropped again. This time by 3 degrees in less than a minute. 57 down to 54. That wasn't a thermocline. That was an active cold source near her position. Maya, your external temp just dropped 3 degrees. Are you feeling that? Yeah, it's getting cold fast. My suit heater's running full blast and I'm still cold. Check your gas mix. Make sure you're not getting a bad feed. Gas is good. This is environmental. The water around me is getting colder. Jack was staring at the fish finder display on my screen. Dana, that return, it's descending. It's at 290 now. My stomach tightened. How fast? Slow. Maybe 1 foot every 2 seconds. But it's coming down. I made a decision. Maya, I want you to hold at 300 feet. Don't continue your descent. We're seeing something on the fish finder and I want to make sure it clears the area before you proceed. What kind of something? We don't know. Could be a large fish, could be debris. Just hold position for a minute. Copy. Holding at 300. The return on the fish finder continued to descend. 285 feet. 280 feet. 275 feet. It was moving at a steady rate, like something sinking under controlled descent, not drifting. Jack enhanced the display, trying to get more detail, but the resolution was too poor. All we could see was a solid mass, roughly circular, maybe 15 to 20 feet in diameter. It's big, Jack said quietly. I know. 70 feet, still descending, still on a direct path toward Maya's position. My hand hovered over the comms button. I needed to make a call, abort the dive and bring Maya up, or let her continue and hope the object passed by without incident. If I aborted now, we'd lose the inspection data and have to reschedule. The client wouldn't be happy. But if something happened to Maya, 265 feet. The return was now only 35 feet above her. I made the call. Maya, abort the dive. Start ascending now. Don't question it, just do it. Copy. Ascending. I watched her camera feed as she kicked upward, her fins flashing in the beam of her helmet light. Her breathing was fast now. Not panicked, but urgent. She knew something was wrong, even if she didn't know what. The return on the fish finder stopped descending. It held at 265 feet for several seconds, then began ascending. Slowly at first, then faster. It was following her. It's following her, Jack said, his voice tight. I know. Maya, increase your ascent rate. Get to 200 feet as fast as you can without risking a barotrauma. Copy. Ascending faster. The return matched her speed. As Maya climbed through 280 feet, the return was at 270. As she passed 260, it was at 250. It maintained a separation of about 10 to 15 feet, like a dog trailing its owner on a leash. Marcus's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dana, what the hell is that thing?" "I don't know. Just keep monitoring her vitals. Let me know if anything changes." Maya was at 240 feet now, climbing steadily. The return stayed with her, never closing the gap but never falling behind. Then, at 230 feet, something changed. The return split. What had been one solid mass on the fish finder suddenly appeared as two distinct objects, side by side, both ascending with Maya. "Did you see that?" Jack said. "Yeah, there's two of them now. Or it split, or it was always two and they were just overlapping." Whatever the explanation, we now had two large objects pacing Maya's ascent, one slightly ahead of her and one slightly behind. I felt sweat forming on my forehead despite the cool air in the cabin. At 300 feet, Marcus, who was monitoring the surface support systems, called out from the deck. "Dana, we've got something on the fish finder." We didn't have dedicated sonar on the Northern Survey, but we had a standard recreational fish finder that Jack had jury-rigged to give us a rough picture of what was in the water column. It wasn't precise, but it was better than nothing. I stepped outside and looked at the display. There was a large return about 50 feet below the surface, maybe 100 feet to the north of Maya's position. "What is that?" Marcus asked. "I don't know. Could be a school of fish. That's a big school. Keep an eye on it. Let me know if it moves closer to Maya." I went back inside and checked the helmet camera. Maya had reached 340 feet and was approaching the lake bottom. The beam of her light swept across the silt, illuminating a flat, featureless plain. A moment later, the cable came into view, a thick black line cutting across her path. "I'm on the bottom," Maya reported. "I have visual on the cable. Beginning inspection." "Copy," I said. "Take your time. We're monitoring from here." Maya began moving along the cable, scanning it with her light and occasionally reaching out to touch the casing. The GoPro on her helmet captured everything in HD. I watched the feed and made notes on my clipboard. The cable looked good. No obvious damage, no corrosion, no displacement. Just like the ROV had shown the day before. At 12:27, Maya stopped. "Hold on, I'm seeing something." "What is it?" There's a section here where the sediment looks disturbed, like something's been digging." "Digging?" "Yeah. The cable is exposed for about 10 feet, and the silt on either side is piled up like it's been pushed." I frowned. Could be current, water movement along the bottom. "There's no current down here, the water is dead still." "Take a photo and keep moving. We'll analyze it later." "Copy." Maya took several photos with the GoPro, then continued along the cable. I made a note to review the images when she surfaced. Disturbed sediment wasn't unusual. Bottom-dwelling fish, water temperature changes, even seismic activity could shift the lake floor. But the way Maya described it sounded deliberate, like something had been excavating. At 12:31, Marcus called from the deck again. "Dana, that return on the fish finder, it's moving." I stepped outside. The fish finder showed the large return descending. It had been at 50 feet, now it was at 100 feet. And it was getting closer to Maya's position. "How fast is it moving?" I asked. "Slow, maybe 1 foot per second, but it's definitely coming down." I keyed the dive comms. "Maya, we've got a large sonar return in the water column above you. It's descending. I want you to stay alert." "What kind of return?" "Unknown. Could be a school of fish, could be debris, Just keep your eyes open. Copy. I watched the fish finder. The return continued to descend, 150 feet, 200 feet, 250 feet. It was moving in a straight line, directly toward Maya's position. My pulse quickened. Maya, the return is at 250 feet and still descending. How's your visibility? About 15 feet. I'm not seeing anything unusual. Keep looking up. It's coming from above you. Copy. I went back inside and stared at the helmet camera feed. Maya's light was pointed forward along the cable, illuminating the silt and the black conduit. I could hear her breathing, steady and rhythmic. Then, at 12:34, the light on her helmet flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. The camera feed went dark for a full second, then came back. Maya, we just lost your camera feed for a moment. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. My light cut out for a second, but it's back now. Check your power systems. Power is good, voltage is normal. I don't know what caused it. On the deck, Marcus was staring at the fish finder. Dana, the return just stopped. It's holding at 300 feet, about 40 feet above Maya. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Maya, abort the dive. Start your ascent now. What? Why? Just do it. We've got a situation up here. I need you out of the water. There was a pause. I could hear the tension in Maya's breathing. Copy. Ascending. I watched the helmet camera as Maya pushed off the bottom and began swimming upward. Her light cut a narrow path through the black water. I could see particles drifting in the beam, tiny specks of organic matter floating in the stillness. Then, at 12:36, I saw it. A shadow, large, irregular, moving across the top of the camera's field of view. It passed slowly from right to left, blocking out the faint ambient glow from above. Maya saw it too. Her breathing hitched. What the hell is that? Keep ascending, I said. Don't stop. There's something above me. I can see its outline. How big? Big? Maybe 20 feet across. It's not a fish. It's too big to be a fish. Can you see any details? No, it's just a shape, a dark mass. It's not moving fast, but it's following me. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at the fish finder, his face pale. It's ascending with her. It's matching her speed. I keyed the comms again. Maya, increase your ascent rate. I want you up here as fast as safely possible. If I ascend too fast, I'll get bent. I know, but I need you out of the water. Trust me. Copy. Ascending faster. On the helmet camera, I saw the shadow again. This time it was closer, maybe 30 feet above her. It wasn't just drifting. It was moving with purpose, keeping pace with Maya as she climbed. I felt my hands shaking. At 250 feet, Maya's breathing was rapid, almost panicked. It's getting closer. I can feel it. Feel it how? I don't know. It's like a pressure in my chest, like something's pushing on me. Stay calm. You're doing great. Just keep coming up. At 200 feet, the shadow moved again. This time it descended rapidly, dropping from above Maya's head to a position directly in front of her. The camera showed it for a brief moment. A massive, dark shape with no clear edges, no defined features. Just blackness. Then it moved off to the side and disappeared. It's gone, Maya said. I don't see it anymore. Keep ascending. At 150 feet, Maya's light flickered again. This time it stayed out for nearly 5 seconds. When it came back on, the beam was dimmer, as if the bulb was losing power. I checked her telemetry. Her suit heater was drawing more power than normal, as if the water temperature around her had suddenly dropped. Maya, what's your water temperature? She checked her dive computer. It's reading 48 degrees. That's not right. It should be 62. It's a sensor malfunction. ignore it and keep ascending. But I knew it wasn't a malfunction. The ROV's camera housing had been cold when we recovered it. Whatever was in the water with Maya was somehow affecting the temperature. Or it was cold itself. At 100 feet, the water brightened slightly. I could see the green tint returning to the camera feed. Maya's breathing was still fast, but she was moving steadily upward. On the fish finder, the large return had stopped at 120 feet and was holding position. It wasn't following her anymore. "I think it's letting me go," Maya said. "Don't slow down, just keep coming." At 50 feet, Maya entered the decompression zone. She had to stop here for 10 minutes to allow nitrogen to safely leave her bloodstream. It's standard procedure, non-negotiable. I knew she wasn't happy about it, but she followed the protocol. She held at 50 feet, breathing slowly, trying to calm herself. I watched the fish finder. The return was still at 120 feet. It hadn't moved. Marcus and I stood on the deck, staring at the water where Maya's bubbles were breaking the surface. The lake was choppy, the surface gray and uninviting. I wanted her out of there. After 10 minutes, Maya ascended to 20 feet for her second decompression stop. 5 minutes there, then she could surface. I counted every second. When the 5 minutes were up, she kicked for the surface and broke through at 13:04 hours. Sean was in the water immediately, helping her to the ladder. We hauled her aboard, and she collapsed on the deck, ripping off her mask and gulping air. "Get that off her," I said, pointing to her helmet. Sean unclipped the helmet and set it aside. Maya's face was pale, her eyes wide. She was shaking. Marcus wrapped a thermal blanket around her shoulders and handed her a bottle of water. She drank half of it in one go, then looked up at me. "What the fuck was that?" "I don't know." "That wasn't a fish. That wasn't debris. That was something alive." "Did you see it clearly?" "No, just the outline. But I felt it. It was aware of me. It knew I was there." Sean picked up Maya's helmet and held it up. Guys, you need to see this." We gathered around. The inside surface of the mask faceplate had a series of small, dark marks near the edges. They looked like scorch marks, the kind you'd get from heat exposure. But the marks were on the inside of the mask, not the outside. Sean ran his finger over them. They were rough, like the polycarbonate had been subjected to intense heat and had partially melted. "How did this happen?" Sean asked. "I don't know," Maya said. "I didn't feel any heat. I was cold the whole time, freezing cold." I took the helmet from Sean and examined it closely. The marks were symmetrical, arranged in a pattern around the edges of the faceplate. They weren't random. They looked deliberate, like something had pressed against the inside of the mask and left an imprint. "Bag this," I said to Sean. "We're sending it to the lab." "What do you think it is?" "I don't know, but I want it analyzed." Maya stood up, still wrapped in the blanket. "I'm done. I'm not going back in that water." "You don't have to," I said. "We're calling off the inspection. We'll file a report with the client and let them decide how to proceed." "What are you going to tell them?" "I'm going to tell them we encountered an unidentified object in the water and had to abort for safety reasons." "That's it? You're not going to mention the shadow? The cold? The marks on my mask?" "I'll mention them, but I'm not going to speculate on what caused them. We don't have enough data." Maya shook her head. "You're covering this up." "I'm not covering anything up. I'm being accurate. We don't know what we saw, so we can't report it as fact. We can only report what we measured and observed." She didn't argue, but I could see she wasn't satisfied. She went below to change out of her dive suit, and Sean followed her. Marcus and I stood on the deck, staring at the water. "We need to call this in," Marcus said. "Call what in?" What are we going to say? That there's something in the lake, something big, something that's interfering with our equipment and putting divers at risk. And who are we going to call? The Coast Guard? The DNR? They'll laugh at us. Then what do? We document everything. We file a detailed report. We send the helmet to a lab for analysis. And we wait for someone else to confirm what we saw before we make any claims. Marcus nodded slowly. You know what this sounds like, don't you? No? What? A cover-up. You're doing exactly what Maya said. I'm protecting this crew and this company from looking like idiots. If we go public with a story about unidentified objects in Lake Michigan, we'll be laughed out of the industry. Our contracts will dry up. We'll be done. And if someone else goes down there and gets hurt, then we'll have more data, and we can act on it. Marcus didn't respond. He just walked away, shaking his head. I stood on the deck for a long time, watching the gray water and thinking about the shadow. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of light, a school of fish, a piece of debris, anything but what it looked like. But I knew better, deep down. I knew we'd seen something that shouldn't exist. And I knew it was still down there, waiting. We returned to Muskegon that evening and docked at 1830 hours. I filed a preliminary incident report with the project manager, describing the equipment malfunctions and the aborted dive, but leaving out most of the details about the sonar returns and the shadow. I phrased it as a safety precaution due to unexplained equipment behavior. The project manager wasn't happy, but he accepted the report and told me to submit a full analysis within 48 hours. Maya went home without speaking to me. Sean and Marcus helped secure the boat, then left as well. Jack stayed behind to review the ROV footage. I joined him in the control cabin, and we went through the recordings frame by frame. The shadow appeared in multiple segments of the footage. In some frames, it was faint, almost invisible. In others, it was stark and well-defined, a massive, dark shape moving through the water above the ROV. Jack froze on one particularly clear frame and zoomed in. The shape had a rough texture, like the surface of a sponge or coral, but there were no biological details, no fins, no appendages, no eyes. "What do you think it is?" Jack asked. "I don't know. Could it be a whale?" "Whales don't live in Lake Michigan." "They used to. There are historical reports of whales in the Great Lakes back in the 1800s. That was 200 years ago. And even if a whale somehow got in here, it wouldn't look like that. Whales are smooth, streamlined. This thing looks wrong." He was right. I stared at the frozen image for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the upper right corner of the frame, there was a faint glow. Not a reflection from the ROV's lights. Those were pointed down and forward. This was a separate source of light, dim and diffuse, like bioluminescence. "Do you see that?" I pointed at the screen. Jack leaned closer. "Yeah, what is it?" "I don't know. Zoom in." He zoomed in on the glow. It was clustered around the edge of the shadow, a faint blue-green luminescence that seemed to emanate from the object itself. Jack enhanced the image, adjusting the brightness and contrast. The glow became more visible, revealing a pattern of spots or nodes distributed across the surface of the shadow. "Bioluminescence," Jack said. "Like deep-sea organisms. But this isn't the deep sea. This is Lake Michigan. There are no bioluminescent species here." "Then, how do you explain it?" I didn't have an explanation. I saved the enhanced image and added it to the incident file. Then I told Jack to package up all the footage and send it to me via encrypted file transfer. I didn't want it sitting on the boat's server where anyone could access it. "Are you worried about something?" Jack asked. I'm worried about a lot of things, but mostly I'm worried that if the wrong people see this footage, we're going to have a lot of questions we can't answer. You mean like the government? Among others. You think they already know about this? I think there have been reports of anomalies on the Great Lakes for decades. Unexplained sonar contacts, strange lights, disappearances. If the government doesn't know, they're not paying attention. Jack looked uneasy. So, what do? We keep our heads down. We finish the analysis, submit the report, and move on to the next project. And we don't talk about this with anyone outside this crew. What about Maya? She's pretty shaken up. I'll talk to Maya. I left the boat and drove to Maya's apartment in Muskegon. She lived on the 3rd floor of an old brick building near the harbor. I knocked on her door, and she answered in sweatpants and a hoodie, her hair still wet from a shower. She didn't look happy to see me. What do you want? She asked. I want to make sure you're okay. I'm fine. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. I entered the small apartment and sat on the couch. Maya stood by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the street below. I'm not diving for you again, she said. Not on Lake Michigan. Not anywhere near where that thing was. I understand. Do you? Because I don't think you do. I've been diving for 15 years. I've been in caves, wrecks, ice water, you name it. I've never been scared. But today I was terrified. That thing wanted something from me. I could feel it. What do you think it wanted? I don't know. But it wasn't just observing. It was testing me, like it was trying to figure out what I was. I thought about that. Did it ever feel aggressive? Like it was going to attack? No, just curious and cold. God, it was so cold. I'm sending your helmet to a lab for analysis. We'll find out what caused those marks. And then what? You're going to publish a report saying we encountered an unknown life form in Lake Michigan? The scientific community will laugh at you. I'm not publishing anything. I'm gathering data. If we get enough data, we can go to the right people. Marine biologists, oceanographers, people who study this kind of thing. Maya turned to look at me. You think this is a biological organism? I don't know what it is, but the bioluminescence suggests it's alive. Or it's something else entirely, something we don't have a category for. I didn't argue with her. We sat in silence for a minute, then I stood to leave. Take a few days off, paid leave, rest, decompress, and don't talk about this with anyone. When you're ready, we'll figure out next steps. There are no next steps, Maya said. I'm done. I understand. I left her apartment and drove home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the shadow, the cold, the marks on Maya's mask. I pulled up the ROV footage on my laptop and watched it again, pausing on the frames where the bioluminescence was visible. The pattern of lights was irregular but not random. It reminded me of something I'd seen in a documentary once. Communication patterns in deep-sea squid. Bioluminescent flashes used to signal other members of the species. Could the shadow be communicating? And if so, with what? The next morning, September 20th, I received a call from the project manager. He'd reviewed my preliminary report and wanted a face-to-face meeting. I drove to his office in Grand Rapids and sat across from him in a sterile conference room with gray walls and fluorescent lights. Walk me through what happened, he said. I did. I gave him the facts. The sonar returns, the camera malfunctions, the aborted dive, the marks on Maya's mask. I showed him the enhanced images of the shadow and the bioluminescence. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. You're telling me there's an unidentified object in Lake Michigan that's large, cold, bioluminescent and potentially intelligent. I'm telling you, we observed something we can't explain using conventional knowledge. Whether it's intelligent, I can't say. And you want to continue the investigation. I want to send the helmet to a lab and analyze the footage more thoroughly. If we can identify the source of the bioluminescence or the thermal signatures, we might be able to determine what we're dealing with. He shook his head. We're not doing that. Why not? Because the client doesn't care. The cable is fine. The inspection is complete. They're not paying us to chase ghosts. This isn't a ghost. This is real. We have footage, telemetry data, physical evidence, which proves nothing. You have a shadow on a camera, some sonar blips, and burn marks that could have been caused by a dozen different things. You don't have a specimen. You don't have conclusive proof. All you have is speculation. Then let's get conclusive proof. Let's go back with better equipment, more cameras, more sensors. No, we're not going back. The project is over. I stared at him. You're shutting this down. I'm protecting this company. If word gets out that we're investigating some kind of lake monster, we'll be a laughingstock. Our credibility will be destroyed. We'll lose contracts, investors, everything. So, yes, I'm shutting this down. What about the safety of other divers? What if someone else encounters this thing? Then they'll file their own report. But we're not responsible for every diver who goes into Lake Michigan. We're responsible for completing our contracts and maintaining our reputation. That's it. I felt my face flush with anger. This is a cover-up. This is a business decision, and it's final. He stood and opened the door, signaling that the meeting was over. I gathered my materials and walked out. On the drive back to Muskegon, I called Jack and told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long time. So, that's it? He said. We just pretend we didn't see anything. That's what they want. What do you want? I want to know the truth, but I can't do it alone, and I can't do it without funding. So what are we going to do? I don't know yet, but I'm not letting this go. I spent the next week compiling a detailed report of the incident, complete with all the footage, telemetry data, and analysis I could gather. I sent Maya's helmet to a private lab for independent testing, paying out of my own pocket. The results came back 10 days later. The lab confirmed that the marks on the inside of the mask were caused by intense heat, temperatures exceeding 300 degrees Fahrenheit. But there was no residue, no chemical signature, no indication of what had generated the heat. The polycarbonate had simply been exposed to a localized thermal event that lasted less than a second. How is that possible? I asked the lab technician over the phone. We don't know, he said. The only thing that could produce that kind of heat that quickly would be a focused energy source, like a laser or a plasma discharge. But there's no evidence of either. It's like the heat appeared out of nowhere. Could it be biological? You mean like an organism that generates heat? Theoretically, yes. Some deep-sea creatures produce bioluminescence through chemical reactions that generate heat as a byproduct. But we're talking about hundreds of degrees in a fraction of a second. That's beyond anything we know of in nature. I thanked him and hung up. The lab results only deepened the mystery. I added them to my report and filed it away. I knew I couldn't do anything with it, not without risking my career and my company's reputation. But I also knew I couldn't just forget what I'd seen. Over the following months, I kept my ear to the ground. I talked to other divers, other contractors, other engineers who worked on the Great Lakes. I heard stories, whispered conversations in bars and equipment rooms. A Coast Guard crew that had tracked an unidentified submerged object off Thunder Bay. A research team that had recorded strange acoustic signatures near Isle Royale. A fishing boat captain who'd seen lights under the ice in winter. None of it was official. None of it was documented. But it was all there, just below the surface. A network of encounters and sightings that no one wanted to talk about publicly. In December, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, Lake Michigan Survey Data. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam, but something made me open it. The email was brief. We know what you saw. We've been tracking it for years. If you want answers, meet us at the Muskegon Breakwater, December 15th, 1900 hours. Come alone. I stared at the email for a long time. It could be a hoax. It could be dangerous. But it could also be the only chance I'd get to find out the truth. On December 15th, I drove to the Muskegon Breakwater just before sunset. The lake was frozen near the shore, and the wind was brutal, cutting through my jacket and numbing my face. I walked out onto the concrete pier, past the lighthouse, and saw a figure standing at the far end. As I got closer, I recognized him, Thomas Parrish, the geospatial analyst who'd helped us with the eerie frequency case. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Following patterns," he said. "You're not the first person to encounter something unexplained on the Great Lakes. You're just one of the few who bothered to document it properly." "Who sent the email?" "A group of us. Scientists, engineers, military personnel. We've all seen things that don't fit the official narrative. We share information, we analyze data, and we try to understand what's happening." "And what is happening?" He turned to look at the lake. The water stretched out to the horizon, dark and endless. "We don't know, but the evidence suggests there's something in the lakes that's been here longer than we have. Something that operates outside our understanding of biology, physics, maybe even reality itself. You're saying it's not natural. I'm saying it's not from here. Or it is from here, but it exists in a way we don't yet comprehend. The sonar returns, the shadows, the thermal anomalies, the electromagnetic interference, they all point to something that bends the rules. Why doesn't anyone talk about it? Because talking about it invites scrutiny, and scrutiny invites intervention. If the government admits there's something in the lakes they can't explain or control, it creates panic, so they suppress the information. They classify the reports. They discredit the witnesses. And life goes on. What about the thing I saw? Do you know what it is? We call them deep water anomalies, DWAs. There are at least 3 distinct types across the 5 lakes. The one in Michigan is the largest and the most active. It appears to feed on electromagnetic fields, ships, underwater cables, anything that generates a current. That's why it was near your inspection site. The cable was attracting it. Is it dangerous? Not in the way you're thinking. It doesn't attack, but it does interfere. And if you're in its vicinity when it's feeding, the effects can be unpredictable. Cold, heat, electromagnetic pulses. We've documented cases of divers experiencing hallucinations, time distortions, even memory loss. Maya felt pressure in her chest, and her mask had burn marks. The pressure is a side effect of the electromagnetic field. The burn marks are heat signatures from localized energy discharges. The DWA was scanning her, trying to understand what she was. You make it sound sentient. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's something that operates on instinct we don't recognize as intelligence. Either way, it's there, and it's not going away. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the waves crash against the pier. Then Parrish handed me a flash drive. This contains everything we've collected over the past decade. Sonar logs, thermal imaging, eyewitness accounts, lab results. Use it however you want, but be careful. If the wrong people find out you have this, it'll disappear, along with you. I took the flash drive and slipped it into my pocket. Why are you giving this to me? Because you documented your encounter properly. You didn't panic. You didn't embellish. You're a scientist. We need people like you if we're ever going to understand what's in the lakes. What do you want me to do with it? Keep collecting data. Keep asking questions. And when the time is right, make it public. Not yet. There's not enough evidence, but someday, when we have enough proof that no one can ignore, we'll tell the world what's really out here. And if that day never comes, then at least we'll know we tried. Parrish walked away, leaving me alone on the pier. I stayed there until full dark, watching the lake and thinking about the shadow. Somewhere beneath the surface, in the cold black water, it was still there. Feeding, scanning, existing in ways I couldn't comprehend. I went home and plugged in the flash drive. It contained thousands of files, reports, videos, audio recordings, research papers. I spent weeks going through it, cross-referencing the data with my own observations. Patterns emerged. The DWAs appeared most frequently near underwater infrastructure. They were drawn to electromagnetic fields. They moved in predictable patterns, following the deep trenches and thermal layers. And they were everywhere, not just Michigan. All 5 lakes, multiple entities operating independently but following similar behaviors. I still work as a marine engineer. I still oversee underwater inspections. But I don't take jobs near the deep trenches anymore. And I always brief my divers about what to do if they encounter something unexplained. Surface immediately, report everything, and don't go back. Maya never dove again. She moved to Colorado and got a job teaching scuba in mountain lakes where the water is clear and shallow. Jack still operates ROVs, but he won't work on Lake Michigan. Marcus retired early and bought a cabin in the UP, far from any large bodies of water. As for me, I'm still here, still watching, still collecting data. The flash drive sits in a safe deposit box, along with my own files from the September inspection. Someday, when there's enough evidence, I'll release it. But not yet. Not until we understand what we're dealing with. Because the truth is, I don't know what that shadow was. I don't know if it was alive, mechanical, or something in between. I don't know if it was intelligent or instinctive. All I know is that it exists. And it's still down there. Every time I drive past Lake Michigan, I look out at the water and wonder what's beneath the surface. The lake looks peaceful from shore, blue and endless and serene. But I know better. I know there are things moving in the deep water, things that don't fit into our understanding of the world. The shadow is real. The cold is real. The burn marks are real, and they're not going away just because we choose not to look. That's my ending. I saw something I can't explain, I documented it, and I'm waiting for the day when the world is ready to hear about it. Until then, I keep my head down and my eyes open. Because once you've seen the shadow, you can't unsee it. And once you know it's there, you can't pretend the lake is just water. It's something more, something older, something that's been here long before we arrived, and will be here long after we're gone. And that's the only truth I'm certain of.